The text message arrived as I was reviewing quarterly projections in my hidden office. 20 years of marriage ended in 16 words. Eleanor, we need to talk. I've fallen for someone else. I'll be moving out this weekend. I stared at my phone, a hollow laugh escaping my lips. How fitting that Richard would choose to end our marriage through text. Efficient, detached, clinical, just like the corporate persona he'd cultivated over 2 decades. I placed my phone face down beside my laptop and continued scrolling through the latest revenue reports from Horizon Industries. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you, my company. Always my company, though Richard had no idea. I glanced at the framed photo on my desk. Richard and me on our wedding day, his arm around my waist, both of us smiling. I'd been 28 then, already 5 years into building what would become one of the most successful tech manufacturing firms in the Northeast. He'd been 32, ambitious, handsome, and utterly convinced he was rescuing a struggling entrepreneur with a failing business. I remember his words on our 3rd date. Your little company has potential, Eleanor, but you need someone with proper business acumen to guide it. The condescension had been breathtaking, but I'd smiled and nodded, already seeing the potential of keeping this overconfident man close while I built my empire quietly. He never questioned why I insisted on keeping my maiden name, Blackwood, for professional reasons. Never wondered why Eleanor Blackwood, the supposed struggling businesswoman, disappeared from public view while Eleanor Mercer, supportive wife, emerged. Never noticed that the shell company he thought he was running, Mercer Solutions, was merely a subsidiary feeding into the true parent company I controlled through a labyrinth of legal entities and investment structures. For 20 years, I'd played the role of the supportive wife who'd given up her modest business ambitions to stand behind her husband. For 20 years, he believed he was the breadwinner, the visionary, the success story. For 20 years, I'd allowed him to believe the lie. My phone buzzed again. Another message. Eleanor, did you get my text? I closed the revenue reports and picked up my phone. 3 little dots appeared as he typed another message. I know this is a shock. I didn't plan for this to happen. Of course he hadn't planned it. Richard Mercer, meticulous planner, strategic thinker, self-proclaimed business genius, hadn't planned to fall for his 27-year-old assistant. How predictable. How disappointing. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Who is she? I texted back, though I already knew. Vanessa Carter, hired 6 months ago, ambitious, pretty, and 23 years his junior. I'd run a background check on her the day after Richard mentioned hiring a new assistant. It was simply good business practice to know who had access to even the peripheral areas of my corporate structure. His response came quickly. I think we should discuss this in person. I checked my watch, 3:47 p.m. I had a video call with investors in Singapore at 4:30. I needed to finish reviewing the projections before then. I'll be home at 8, I texted, then set my phone to silent. Compartmentalization had always been my strength. For the next 2 hours, I focused entirely on the upcoming investor call, pushing thoughts of my imploding marriage aside with the same discipline I'd used to build a commercial empire, while pretending to be nothing more than a corporate wife who dabbled in charity functions. The call went well. It always did. I'd learned early that men with money respected 2 things: consistent returns and confident leadership. I provided both, appearing on their screens in my customary understated elegance, blonde hair in a neat chignon, pearl earrings that had been my grandmother's, a charcoal gray suit jacket over a cream silk blouse, the perfect image of sophisticated competence. None of the investors knew I was calling from a converted storage room in the basement of the home I shared with my soon-to-be ex-husband. None of them knew that for 20 years, I'd maintained two entirely separate professional lives. Eleanor Blackwood, the reclusive CEO who conducted all business remotely, and Eleanor Mercer, the corporate wife who organized charity galas and smiled supportively at company functions. By 7:30 p.m., I'd finalized plans for our expansion into the European market and sent instructions to my executive team. No one questioned why the CEO preferred video conferences to in-person meetings. My results spoke for themselves, and in the post-pandemic business world, remote leadership was no longer unusual. I shut down my computers and locked my office, the only room in our sprawling suburban home that Richard never entered. He believed it was my craft room, a quaint hobby space where I occasionally retreated to make handmade cards and scrapbooks. The hidden panel concealing my actual workstation was secured by a biometric lock keyed only to my fingerprint. The security measures might have seemed excessive, but when you're secretly running a company that your husband believes is his, discretion becomes second nature. Upstairs, I changed into what Richard once called my homemaker uniform, tailored. Slacks and a cashmere sweater, comfortable but elegant. The perfect attire for a woman whose greatest challenge should be planning dinner parties and managing household staff. I heard his key in the door at precisely 8:03 p.m. Richard was punctual. If nothing else, Eleanor? His voice echoed through our marble foyer. I could hear the uncertainty in it, the guilty edge that told me he'd rehearsed this conversation in his mind, but still feared the unpredictability of my response. I waited for him in the living room, seated in the Italian leather armchair that faced the entrance. My posture was perfect, legs crossed at the ankle, hands resting lightly on the armrests. The very picture of composure. He paused in the doorway, his tall frame silhouetted against the hall light. At 52, Richard Mercer was still handsome in that distinguished, corporate way. Silver threading through his dark hair, his face lined just enough to suggest experience rather than age. He wore the navy suit I'd purchased for him last Christmas, tailored to emphasize his broad shoulders and minimize the slight softening around his middle. "You got my text," he said, a statement rather than a question. I did. My voice was measured, controlled. "You've fallen for someone else and you're moving out this weekend." He stepped into the room, his movements stiff. I could see the conflicting emotions on his face, guilt warring with relief, concern about my reaction mixing with impatience to begin his new life. "Eleanor, I'm sorry. I never meant for this to happen." The same words from his text, rehearsed and hollow. "Is it Vanessa?" I asked, watching his face. Surprise flickered in his eyes. "How did you mention her constantly, Richard. You're not exactly subtle." I kept my tone neutral, neither accusatory nor wounded. 3 months ago, you started working late every Tuesday and Thursday. Your dry cleaning suddenly included women's perfume. Last month, you opened a separate credit card account. He stared at me, his expression shifting from guilt to something like admiration. "You noticed all that?" "I notice everything." It was the most honest statement I'd made to him in years. He sank onto the sofa across from me, loosening his tie with a practiced gesture. "I didn't want it to end like this. 20 years is a long time." "Yes, it is. 20 years of watching him take credit for ideas that weren't his. Watching him climb a corporate ladder I'd built rung by rung. Watching him believe his own mythology, while I quietly controlled everything from the shadows. She makes me feel alive, Eleanor. Young again." His voice took on that earnest quality he used when trying to sell someone on a concept. "We've grown apart, you and I. When was the last time we truly connected?" I almost smiled at the irony. We'd never truly connected because I'd never allowed him to see who I really was. The woman he'd married was a carefully constructed facade. The brilliant but naive entrepreneur who needed his guidance, who gradually receded into the background to become his supportive wife. Eleanor Mercer was a character I played, nothing more. "How long has it been going on?" I asked, more out of curiosity than jealousy. 3 months, he admitted, then quickly added, "But I tried to fight it, Eleanor. I really did. 3 months, around the time I'd signed off on his promotion to Chief Operating Officer of Mercer Solutions, the subsidiary he believed was the entire company. I'd authorized the promotion myself, through the proper channels that kept my identity as the true CEO concealed. I'd even sent him congratulatory flowers signed from the board." "I see," I said. "And you're moving out this weekend?" He nodded, looking relieved that I wasn't screaming or throwing things. "I've leased an apartment downtown. I'll come by Saturday morning to pack my things, if that's acceptable." "Perfectly acceptable." I uncrossed my ankles and stood up in one fluid motion. "I assume you'll want a divorce." "I think it's for the best," he said, watching me warily. "We can keep this amicable, Eleanor. I've been speaking with a mediator who specializes in—" "You've already consulted a divorce mediator?" I raised an eyebrow. He had the grace to look embarrassed. "I wanted to be prepared, to make this as painless as possible for you. For me, always the magnanimous Richard, looking out for his fragile wife's feelings while he systematically dismantled our marriage." "Very thoughtful," I murmured. "I'll have my lawyer contact this mediator of yours." "Your lawyer?" He looked surprised. "Eleanor, we don't need to escalate to lawyers immediately. The mediator can—" "I prefer to have proper representation, Richard." I moved toward the door, a clear dismissal. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a headache. I'm going to lie down." He stood, clearly disconcerted by my calm reaction. "Eleanor, are you all right? Was I all right?" I was about to lose the husband I'd never particularly loved but had maintained as a useful front for 2 decades. My carefully constructed double life was about to undergo a seismic shift. The protective layer of Richard's wife that had kept me safely anonymous was being stripped away. "I'll be fine, Richard." I offered him a small smile. 20 years is indeed a long time, perhaps too long to continue playing roles that no longer fit. His brow furrowed at my cryptic response, but he didn't press further. "I'll sleep in the guest room tonight." "As you wish." I watched him climb the stairs, shoulders slightly hunched as though expecting a delayed emotional outburst to follow him. When he disappeared down the hallway, I returned to the living room and poured myself 2 fingers of the 30-year-old Macallan I kept for significant occasions. This certainly qualified. I took my scotch to the large picture window overlooking our manicured garden, illuminated by strategic landscape lighting I'd designed myself. Beyond our property, the lights of the city glimmered in the distance. Somewhere out there, Vanessa Carter was probably waiting anxiously for news of Richard's conversation with his wife. Perhaps they'd already spoken since his text to me earlier. Perhaps she was celebrating her victory. Little did either of them know that this wasn't an ending for me, but a recalibration. For 20 years, I'd hidden in plain sight, directing my company through elaborate corporate structures while presenting myself as nothing more than a successful man's wife. I'd used Richard's ego and ambition as camouflage, allowing him to believe he was the business genius, while I quietly built something far greater than he could imagine. Now that facade was crumbling, and I needed to decide what came next. I sipped my scotch, feeling the warmth spread through my chest. Options unfolded in my mind like a strategic flowchart. I could maintain the status quo at Horizon Industries, continuing as the remote, reclusive CEO while negotiating a quiet divorce from Richard. I could reveal myself to him during the divorce proceedings, watching his face as he realized the company he thought he helped build had always been mine alone. Or I could wait, letting him establish his new life with Vanessa, and then orchestrate a more educational revelation. My phone buzzed with an incoming email. My CFO, Sophia Chen, one of the few people who knew my true identity, had sent the final acquisition numbers for a small manufacturing plant in Dresden. The purchase would be complete by the end of the month, adding another strategic asset to the Horizon portfolio. Business continued, regardless of personal upheaval. That had always been my philosophy. I finished my scotch and set the glass aside. Tomorrow would be soon enough to begin plotting my next moves. Tonight, I needed to process the fact that after 20 years of marriage, my husband had left me for his assistant, completely unaware that he'd never been anything more than an unwitting front man for my corporate empire. The irony was almost poetic. In our bedroom, I changed into silk pajamas and removed my makeup with practiced efficiency. The face that looked back at me from the mirror was composed, showing none of the turbulence beneath. At 48, I still retained the beauty that had initially caught Richard's eye. High cheekbones, clear gray eyes, skin kept youthful through disciplined care and discreet cosmetic assistance. But it was the intelligence behind those eyes that had built Horizon Industries, not the beauty that had snared a husband. As I slipped between the Egyptian cotton sheets, my mind was already working through scenarios and contingencies. By the time Richard woke in the guest room tomorrow, I would have a plan. By the time he moved out on Saturday, I would have set that plan in motion. He thought he was leaving me for a younger woman, starting a new chapter in his life. He had no idea that I was about to rewrite the entire story. Sleep came easily, as it always did when I had complex problems to solve. My last thought before drifting off was that Richard had done me a favor. After 20 years of playing a role, I was finally free to step into the spotlight. The real Eleanor Blackwood was about to emerge from the shadows, and Richard Mercer had no idea what was coming. Morning sunlight filtered through the custom blinds I'd had installed last spring. I'd been awake for hours, reviewing acquisition reports from my tablet while Richard slept in the guest room down the hall. At precisely 6:30 a.m., I heard his shower turn on. His routine hadn't changed in 15 years. Shower for exactly 7 minutes, dress in 12, breakfast in 8. I'd timed it all once, out of curiosity. Richard prided himself on efficiency. I slipped out of bed and prepared for the day with my own practiced efficiency. By the time Richard appeared in the kitchen at 7:05 a.m., I was already seated at the marble island, dressed in cream-colored slacks and a pale blue cashmere sweater, hair neatly arranged, reading the Wall Street Journal's digital edition on my tablet. A pot of coffee sat ready beside a single porcelain cup, my own already half empty. He hesitated in the doorway, clearly expecting a different scene, perhaps tearful recriminations, broken dishes, or at minimum, the silent treatment. My normalcy seemed to unnerve him more than any emotional display would have. "Good morning," I said without looking up from my tablet. "There's coffee." "Thank you," he murmured, moving cautiously toward the pot. "Did you sleep well?" I glanced up, offering a small smile. "Well enough. You're meeting with the Richardson account today, aren't you?" "The presentation is at 9. His eyebrows rose slightly. He hadn't mentioned the Richardson meeting to me. Then again, he believed I took only a casual interest in his work, gleaning bits and pieces from his dinner. Table monologues. He didn't know I'd reviewed the entire presentation myself 3 days ago, making strategic adjustments through proper channels to ensure it would succeed, despite the flaws in his approach. "Yes, that's right," he said, pouring his coffee. "It's an important account." 12 million in manufacturing contracts, I said mildly. "It could open the European market for specialized components." He studied me over the rim of his cup. "You've been paying more attention to my work than I realized." "We've been married 20 years, Richard. Of course I pay attention." I returned to my tablet, scrolling through market projections as though they were celebrity gossip. "Will you be home for dinner?" The question hung between us, loaded with implication. Home. A concept rapidly changing for both of us. Richard set his cup down with a careful precision that told me he was choosing his next words deliberately. "I have plans this evening." "With Vanessa," I supplied, still not looking up. "Yes." he admitted after a pause. We need to discuss arrangements. Arrangements, I echoed, a delicate euphemism for dismantling a 20-year marriage. He sighed, running a hand through his still damp hair. Eleanor, I want you to know that I'll make sure you're taken care of financially. The house, of course, will remain yours. No, you've never had to worry about money, but I want to assure you— That's very generous, I interrupted, finally meeting his gaze. But perhaps we should wait for the mediator before discussing financial arrangements. His confidence faltered momentarily. Richard had always believed he controlled our financial destiny. In his mind, I was the wife who had given up her modest business ambitions to support his spectacular rise. The house, the cars, the art collection, the vacation properties in Aspen and the Hamptons, all fruits of his labor that he would now magnanimously share with his discarded wife. If only he knew that every asset was already mine, purchased through complex ownership structures that all led back to Horizon Industries. The company he believed he helped run was merely a tributary feeding into my corporate ocean. Of course, he said, recovering quickly. I just wanted to reassure you. I appreciate the sentiment. I closed my tablet and stood, gathering my empty coffee cup. Good luck with the Richardson account. They're conservative in their decision-making, but they value innovation. Balance those elements in your presentation, and you'll secure the contract. He stared at me, surprise evident in his expression. That's actually very insightful. I listen when you talk about work, I said with a small shrug. It wasn't entirely a lie. I did listen to his sanitized versions of business developments I'd already directed, finding it fascinating to hear how he interpreted and claimed credit for strategies I'd implemented. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us, 20 years of shared history suddenly reframing itself in the harsh light of impending separation. For a moment I thought I detected a flicker of doubt in his eyes, perhaps wondering if he'd underestimated the woman he was leaving. I should go, he said finally, setting his half-empty cup in the sink. The Richardson meeting. Of course. I moved toward the coffee maker, my back to him. Have a productive day, Richard. I felt rather than saw his hesitation. The aborted movement toward me. The habit of 20 years suggesting a parting kiss that was no longer appropriate. Then came his retreating footsteps, the sound of his briefcase being collected from the hall table, and finally the soft click of the front door. Only then did I allow myself a moment of true reaction, not grief or anger, but a single deep exhale of anticipation. The game had begun. I waited 15 minutes to ensure Richard was well on his way to the office, then descended to my hidden workspace. The security panel slid open at my fingerprint's touch, revealing the command center from which I'd built my empire. 3 large monitors displayed real-time data from Horizon's global operations, a secure phone line connected directly to my executive team, and a digital wall safe containing the legal documentation of my elaborate corporate structure. I settled into my ergonomic chair and opened a secure messaging channel to Sophia Chen, my CFO, and one of only 5 people who knew my true identity as Horizon's founder and CEO. Richard's leaving me for his assistant, I typed without preamble. He's moving out Saturday. Need to discuss contingency plan implementation. Available for lunch? Her response came immediately. 12:30 at Valtari. Private room is available. Confirmed, I replied, then switched to my email to check the overnight. Reports from our Asian manufacturing facilities. For the next 3 hours, I immersed myself in the work that had always been my true passion. I reviewed production metrics, approved design modifications for a new semiconductor component, and finalized the acquisition of a small but innovative materials science lab in Toronto. This was the real me, not the supportive corporate wife who organized charity galas and remembered colleagues' children's names, but the strategic visionary who had built a technology manufacturing empire from the ground up. At precisely 11:45, I emerged from my basement sanctum and transformed back into Eleanor Mercer, soon-to-be ex-wife of Richard Mercer. I changed into a Chanel suit in a subdued gray, added a simple strand of pearls, and drove my Mercedes, purchased through a Horizon subsidiary, though Richard believed it was his gift to me on our 15th anniversary, to Valtari, an exclusive restaurant in the business district. The maitre d' greeted me by name and escorted me to the private dining room where Sophia was already waiting, a tablet and legal folder on the table beside her. At 42, Sophia Chen was a formidable woman. In her own right, Harvard MBA, 5 years at Goldman Sachs before I'd recruited her to Horizon. Her impeccable financial strategies had helped turn my vision into a multi-billion-dollar reality. More importantly, she was one of the few people I trusted completely. 20 years, she said, as I took my seat across from her. And he throws it away for a cliché. Men of a certain age are predictable, I replied, accepting the sparkling water the server poured. But this was always a possibility I planned for. Sophia nodded, unsurprised. I'd earned her loyalty years ago not just through generous compensation, but by demonstrating time and again that I was always several moves ahead of everyone else. "Which contingency are we implementing?" she asked after the server had taken our orders and left the room. "I'm still deciding." I smoothed my napkin across my lap. The situation presents both challenges and opportunities. Richard's departure removes the convenient shield of being just a corporate wife, but it also frees me from maintaining that facade. "You could simply continue as you have been," Sophia suggested. "Remain the remote CEO who conducts business, through video conferences and encrypted messages. The divorce would be public, but your role at Horizon would remain concealed." "I've considered that," I acknowledged, "but I'm also contemplating a more educational approach." A slight smile curved Sophia's lips. She understood my meaning immediately. "How much would you like Mr. Mercer to learn, and when?" "That's the question, isn't it?" I took a sip of water. "The timing is critical. If I reveal myself during divorce proceedings, he'll make a desperate grab for company assets. If I wait until after everything is finalized, the revelation would be purely instructional with no financial implications," Sophia finished my thought. "Precisely. Our lunch arrived. Seared scallops for me, miso-glazed sea bass for Sophia. We paused our conversation until the server had departed, closing the private room's door behind him. "There's also Vanessa to consider," I continued, delicately cutting a scallop. "From the background check I ran when Richard hired her, she appears to be genuinely ambitious. Good academic credentials, impressive work history for someone her age." "You think she's with Richard for his perceived success rather than his charm?" Sophia asked with a raised eyebrow. "I think she believes he's more successful than he actually is," I clarified. "Which makes their relationship another variable in the equation." Sophia opened the legal folder beside her plate and slid several documents across the table. "These are the latest ownership diagrams for the corporate structure. As you can see, Richard has no actual claim to any significant assets, despite his beliefs to the contrary. I reviewed the diagrams, though I knew them by heart. 20 years of meticulous planning had created a labyrinth of holding companies, investment vehicles, and management entities that all ultimately led back to me while keeping my identity, concealed from almost everyone. "The prenuptial agreement is ironclad," Sophia continued. "Even if he somehow discovered your role at Horizon, his claims would be null and void. The agreement specifically excludes any business assets acquired, before or during the marriage." "Richard insisted on that clause," I recalled with a hint of amusement. "He was so concerned about protecting his nascent business success from potential claims. He never questioned why I agreed so readily." "Because you were protecting assets he didn't know existed," Sophia said, sharing my appreciation for the irony. "Exactly." I returned the documents to the folder. "What's the status on the Dresden acquisition?" "Final paperwork will be complete by end of business today. The integration team is ready to begin on Monday. And the Richardson account? Sophia checked her tablet. Richard's presentation was successful, as you ensured it would be. Contract is being drawn up as we speak. I nodded, satisfied. Despite the personal upheaval, business continued seamlessly, as it always would under my direction. I need information, I said, finishing my last scallop. Complete surveillance on Richard and Vanessa. I want to know where they go, what they discuss, especially regarding their professional futures. Activate the security protocols on all of Richard's devices. Already done, Sophia confirmed. The monitoring systems were activated last night after your text message. Initial data shows multiple calls between them yesterday evening and restaurant reservations for tonight at Laurent's. Laurent's, I mused, where Richard proposed to me. Not very imaginative. Would you like to see the transcripts of their calls? Sophia offered, her finger hovering above her tablet. I considered for a moment. No, the content is predictable. Just monitor for any mention of business plans or financial discussions. Our dessert arrived, a single exquisite chocolate confection that we would share, as we always did during our infrequent in-person meetings. As Sophia took the first bite, she looked at me with quiet concern. How are you really, Eleanor? Beyond the strategic considerations. It was a question few people would dare ask me, but Sophia had earned the right over years of loyal service and genuine friendship. I'm recalibrating, I answered truthfully. The marriage served its purpose as convenient cover while I built. Horizon. From a purely practical standpoint, its end is merely an operational adjustment. And from a non-practical standpoint? Sophia pressed gently. I took my turn with the dessert, savoring the complex chocolate layers while gathering my thoughts. 20 years is a long time to play a role, I said finally. There's a certain relief in the prospect of setting it aside. I'm not heartbroken that Richard is leaving. Our marriage has been a business arrangement for most of its duration. But I am irritated by the manner of his departure. The midlife cliché of it all, Sophia suggested. Partly that, I agreed, but also the presumption. His belief that he's the successful one, magnanimously ensuring I'll be taken care of financially. His conviction that walking away from me is walking away with his power intact. Sophia nodded, understanding perfectly. Hence the educational approach you're considering. Indeed. I dabbed my lips with my napkin, decision crystallizing. I think it's time Richard learned exactly who built the company he believes is his crowning achievement. But not immediately. Let him establish his new life with Vanessa first. Let him make promises to her based on his perceived success. And then... Sophia's eyes gleamed with anticipation. And then we'll arrange a proper introduction to Eleanor Blackwood, founder and CEO of Horizon Industries. I smiled, the expression not reaching my eyes. After 20 years in the shadows, I find I'm looking forward to stepping into the light. Sophia raised her water glass in a subtle toast. The timing of the revelation will be crucial. It always is. I glanced at my watch. I should return home. Richard will be picking up some personal items this evening before his dinner with Vanessa. I want to be there. Of course. Sophia gathered the documents, secure in their folder. I'll have the first surveillance report to you by tomorrow morning. As we parted outside the restaurant, Sophia hesitated. Eleanor, one more thing. The London conference next month. Will you still attend remotely as planned or... I considered the International Technology Conference I'd been scheduled to address via secure video link, as I'd done for years. The thought of continuing to hide behind screens suddenly felt stifling. Book me a flight and accommodations, I decided. I believe it's time for Eleanor Blackwood to make her first public appearance. In 2 decades. Sophia's eyes widened slightly. That's quite a statement. The business press will go wild trying to piece together your background. Let them try, I replied with calm confidence. By then, I'll have a narrative prepared that serves our purposes, as I drove home. My mind was already crafting the perfect strategy for the weeks ahead. Richard would need to be carefully managed during the divorce proceedings, given just enough information to ensure a smooth legal separation, but not enough to glimpse the truth until I was ready for him to see it. Vanessa would need to be assessed more thoroughly. Was she merely a convenient escape for a man having a midlife crisis, or did she have her own agenda? The distinction would determine whether she became collateral damage or an unwitting player in the unfolding drama. And I would need to prepare for my emergence from the shadows, not just a personal reinvention after 20 years as Richard Mercer's wife, but a carefully orchestrated revelation of my true identity as one of the most successful CEOs in the technology manufacturing sector. The game was complex, with multiple moving pieces and several possible outcomes. But then, I'd always excelled at chess, particularly the endgame, when careful positioning finally reveals the strategy that was present all along. Richard had no idea that in leaving me for his assistant, he hadn't delivered a devastating blow. He'd simply advanced the timeline on a revelation that would redefine everything he thought he knew about his life, his career, and the woman he'd so carelessly discarded. As I pulled into the driveway of the home that had never truly been ours, I felt a sense of anticipation I hadn't experienced in years. After 2 decades of playing a role, I was finally free to be myself, and Richard Mercer was about to learn exactly who that was. Richard arrived at 5:30 p.m. to collect some personal items before his dinner with Vanessa. I was in the kitchen, preparing a cup of Earl Grey tea when I heard his key in the door. The hesitant quality of his entrance, the pause before fully coming inside, the careful way he closed the door, spoke volumes about his discomfort. "Eleanor?" His voice carried through the foyer, uncertain. "In the kitchen," I replied, keeping my tone neutral as I added a splash of milk to my tea. He appeared in the doorway, still in his work suit, but with his tie loosened and collar unbuttoned. The Richardson presentation had been successful, as I'd ensured it would be, but the strain of our situation showed in the tight lines around his eyes. "I just came to pick up a few things," he said, hovering at the threshold. "I won't be long. Take your time." I gestured toward his favorite scotch on the bar cart. "Feel free to have a drink if you like." Richard looked momentarily confused by my continued courtesy. "No, thank you. I'm driving and I have dinner plans." "Of course. With Vanessa at Laurent's." I sipped my tea, watching his expression shift from confusion to suspicion. "How did you know that?" I smiled slightly. "You forget how small the business community is in this city, Richard. People talk." It wasn't entirely a lie. People did talk, and my surveillance network captured every word that concerned Horizon Industries or its subsidiaries, including Mercer, Solutions, and its executives. Richard moved further into the kitchen, his suspicion giving way to something like guilt. "Eleanor, I want you to know that Vanessa and I didn't— It wasn't planned. We never intended to hurt you. And yet, here we are." I set my teacup down with a soft clink. "Tell me, does she know you're moving out this weekend? Or was tonight's dinner meant to surprise her with the news?" "She knows," he admitted, color rising in his cheeks. "We've been discussing it for a few weeks." "I see." I nodded thoughtfully. "So the only person not included in the discussion about the end of my marriage was me. How efficient." Richard winced at the subtle barb. "I didn't know how to tell you. I kept hoping my feelings for her would fade, that it was just a midlife crisis," I supplied helpfully. "A temporary infatuation with youth and novelty?" "It's not like that," he protested, a hint of defensiveness creeping into his voice. "Vanessa is intelligent, ambitious. She understands the business world in a way that—" He stopped abruptly, realizing the implied criticism. "In a way that I never did?" I finished for him, my voice cool but not angry. "Because I gave up my modest business ambitions to support yours?" Richard had the grace to look ashamed. I didn't mean it like that. I'm sure you didn't. I picked up my tea again. You should get your things. I wouldn't want you to be late for your reservation. Dismissed, he nodded and retreated upstairs to pack an overnight bag. I remained in the kitchen, listening to his movements above. The click of the closet door, the slide of drawers, the soft thud of shoes being collected. My phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Sophia. Monitoring active. V already at restaurant. Waiting at bar. Confirms flight to Aspen booked for this weekend. Aspen. Our vacation home, or rather, my vacation home, owned through a Horizon subsidiary but ostensibly a gift from Richard for our 10th anniversary. Apparently, he planned to introduce Vanessa to his luxury chalet in the mountains. I typed, back, proceed with property transfer protocol, standard documentation. The response came immediately, already in progress, legal finalizing papers now. By the time Richard returned downstairs with a large duffel bag and garment carrier, I had moved to the living room with my tea, reviewing a scientific journal article on my tablet as though it were a lifestyle magazine. I've taken just the essentials, he said, setting his luggage by the door. I'll come back for the rest on Saturday, if that's still acceptable. Perfectly acceptable, I replied without looking up. Though you might want to reconsider your Aspen plans this weekend. His head snapped up, eyes widening. How did you— As I said, people talk. I finally looked at him, my expression neutral. The chalet staff would need to be notified of your arrival. Did you imagine they wouldn't mention it to me? Another half-truth. The property management company reported directly to my office, not to Richard, though he believed otherwise. I was going to tell you, he said, the lie obvious in his tone. It's just a short trip, to clear my head and think about next steps. With Vanessa, I added mildly. Richard's jaw tightened. Yes, with Vanessa. I'm not going to lie about that. How refreshing. I returned to my tablet. In any case, you should check with your assistant about the property availability before finalizing your plans. The property is in my name, Eleanor, he said, a hint of exasperation creeping into his voice. I don't need to check availability. I looked up again, allowing myself a small smile. If you say so. Have a pleasant evening, Richard. Confusion flickered across his face, but he chose not to pursue the matter further. With a curt nod, he collected his bags and left. I waited until I heard his car pull away before setting my tablet aside and reaching for my phone. I dialed a direct number to my legal department. Ms. Blackwood, answered Thomas Wright, head of Horizon's legal division and another of the select few who knew my true identity. We've completed the property transfer documentation as instructed, by Ms. Chen. Excellent, I replied. Has the Aspen Property Management Company been notified of the ownership clarification? Yes, ma'am. The company now understands that the property is solely owned by Horizon Luxury Holdings, not Mr. Mercer personally. They've been instructed to decline any reservation attempts from Mr. Mercer until further notice. Perfect. What about the other properties? Same protocol implemented for the Hamptons House and the Lake Como Villa. All staff have been notified of the change in access authorization. And the timing of the notification to Richard? The formal letters clarifying ownership will be delivered to his office tomorrow morning. They simply state that the properties are owned by Horizon Luxury Holdings, a subsidiary of Horizon Industries, and that his access was courtesy of his position at Mercer Solutions. With his impending departure from that position, access privileges are being reviewed. I smiled, visualizing Richard's reaction when he received those letters. He'll assume it's a mistake. Most likely, Thomas agreed. The documentation appears routine, not punitive, just a standard corporate procedure regarding executive privileges. And if he investigates Horizon Industries, he'll find what everyone finds, a privately held conglomerate with a complex ownership structure. Your name doesn't appear in any publicly accessible documents. Good. Keep me updated on any response from Richard. After ending the call, I descended to my private office to review the surveillance reports Sophia had sent. The cameras installed in Richard's office, officially, for corporate security but accessible only to my team, had captured his afternoon activities in detail. He'd spent most of the day riding the high of the successful Richardson presentation, accepting congratulations from colleagues who had no idea the presentation's success had been orchestrated from above. At 3:45 p.m., he'd called Vanessa into his office, ostensibly for a work discussion. I activated the audio recording. "Everything's set for this weekend," Richard's voice came through clearly. "I told Eleanor I'm collecting my things on Saturday morning, then we can drive to the airport." "Did you tell her about Aspen?" Vanessa asked, her voice younger but with a composed professionalism that surprised me. "No, and I don't intend to," Richard replied. "She doesn't need to know our plans. The chalet is mine. I paid for it. I maintain it. The divorce settlement can address it later." I smiled at the irony. Richard had never paid a cent toward the purchase or maintenance of the Aspen property. Like everything else in our life together, it had been acquired through my corporate resources while he remained blissfully ignorant of the true financial arrangements. "What about your meeting with the board next week?" Vanessa continued. "Are you still planning to propose the restructuring?" I leaned forward, suddenly more interested. "What restructuring?" "Absolutely." Richard sounded confident, energized. "With the Richardson contract secured, I have leverage. The board will approve my plan to spin off the European division as a separate entity with me as CEO. And me as COO?" Vanessa's voice held a hint of ambition that confirmed my earlier assessment of her character. "That's the plan," Richard affirmed. "We'll build something together, Vanessa. Something that's truly ours, not just another division, in a faceless conglomerate." I paused the recording, processing this unexpected information. Richard was planning to propose spinning off Horizon's European operations I had spent 5 years carefully building, into a separate company, under his leadership. With his assistant-turned-lover as his second-in-command, the audacity was almost admirable. I resumed the recording, listening as they discussed potential board members, funding strategies, and market positioning for their imagined new venture. Richard spoke with the confidence of a man who believed his success was entirely his own creation, never once acknowledging that every opportunity he'd ever had at Mercer Solutions had been carefully orchestrated from above. When the recording ended, I sat back in my chair, fingers steepled beneath my chin as I considered this new development. Richard's planned corporate coup added an interesting dimension to the situation. Instead of simply leaving me for a younger woman, a personal betrayal, he was simultaneously attempting to carve off a significant portion of my company for himself. The personal and professional now overlapped completely, which changed the calculus of my response. I opened a secure channel to Sophia. "Did you review the afternoon surveillance?" I asked when her face appeared on my screen. "Yes," she confirmed, her expression professional but with a hint of amusement in her eyes. "The European spin-off proposal is ambitious and completely unauthorized," I added. Though Richard doesn't realize that, of course. He believes the board he reports to has the authority to approve such a plan. When in reality, they're just middle managers with prestigious titles, Sophia finished. "What's your course of action?" I considered for a moment. "Richard plans to present this proposal next Thursday at the quarterly board meeting. I think it's time we arranged a special guest appearance." Sophia's eyebrows rose slightly. "You're accelerating the timeline?" "Slightly," I confirmed. I'd planned to wait until after the divorce was finalized, but Richard's corporate ambitions make that timeline suboptimal. Schedule a full board meeting for Horizon Industries' actual governing board on Wednesday. I'll attend in person. In person? Now Sophia looked truly surprised. "You haven't attended a board meeting in person in over 15 years. "Precisely. It's time the board met Eleanor Blackwood face to face, don't you think? Especially before they're asked to address an unauthorized restructuring proposal from a subsidiary executive. I'll make the arrangements, Sophia promised. And Richard's proposal? Let him prepare it, I decided. In fact, ensure he receives encouragement from his supposed superiors. I want him walking into that board meeting completely confident that his plan will be approved. And then we'll see how he handles discovering that the company he thought he helped build has always been just a small piece of something much larger, something he never even knew existed. After ending the call with Sophia, I spent another hour reviewing the European division's performance metrics and strategic positioning. Richard wasn't entirely wrong about its potential as a standalone entity. The division had been deliberately structured to function with significant autonomy. What he didn't understand was that this design was part of my larger strategy for Horizon's global operations, not an invitation for an ambitious executive to appropriate it for himself. My phone buzzed with another encrypted message from Sophia. V and R at Laurent's, discussing timeline for European headquarters relocation. R promises corner office overlooking Seine. Paris. They were planning to relocate to Paris as part of their new venture. I wondered if Vanessa spoke French or if Richard assumed his native English would suffice, as he had during our infrequent visits to the city over the years. I had opened an office in Paris 12 years ago, choosing the location personally for its strategic access to both European markets and North African manufacturing partners. The building Richard was presumably describing to Vanessa, with its stunning views of the Seine, was owned not by Mercer Solutions, but by Horizon Global Properties, another subsidiary in my corporate web. The presumption was staggering. And, yet, entirely in character for Richard, who had spent 20 years believing that his success was self-made rather than carefully managed from above. I closed my surveillance programs and ascended from my hidden office, securing it behind me. In the kitchen, I poured myself a glass of the Bordeaux Richard believed he'd discovered on a business trip to France, but that had actually been selected by my European operations director based on my known preferences. Taking my wine onto the terrace that overlooked our carefully landscaped garden, I contemplated the week ahead. Richard would receive the property clarification letters tomorrow morning. By Saturday, when he attempted to take Vanessa to Aspen, he would discover that his access had been revoked. By next Wednesday, he would learn that his corporate identity, like his marriage, had been built on a carefully constructed illusion. The dismantling of Richard Mercer's life would be methodical, precise, and thoroughly documented. Just as I'd built my company, I would now orchestrate this revelation with strategic patience and attention to detail. My phone vibrated with an incoming call, the secure line used only by my most trusted executives. Eleanor Blackwood, I answered, using my true name as I always did with the select few who knew it. Ms. Blackwood, it's James Liu. My chief technology officer spoke with the crisp efficiency I valued in all my top executives. The Dresden integration team has discovered something interesting in their preliminary assessment. Go on. The facility has a proprietary manufacturing process for carbon nanotube semiconductors that wasn't disclosed in the acquisition documents. It appears to be a black project, developed off the books. My interest sharpened immediately. Capabilities? Potentially revolutionary, James replied. Preliminary tests show processing speeds 40% faster than our current top-tier components, with 60% less power consumption. Verification status? Confirmed by our engineering team. This is real, Ms. Blackwood. I took a sip of wine, mind already calculating the implications. Who knows about this? Just the integration team leads and myself. We've implemented isolation protocols as per acquisition security standards. Good. I want a full briefing tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Secure channel. Yes, ma'am. After ending the call, I remained on the terrace, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. The Dresden discovery could represent a significant leap forward for Horizon's semiconductor division, precisely the kind of technological advantage I'd built my company by identifying and developing before competitors recognized the potential. It was a reminder of why I'd created this double life in the first place. While Richard had spent 20 years playing the role of successful executive, enjoying the trappings of wealth and status, I had been building something truly meaningful, a company that pushed the boundaries of what was possible in manufacturing. Technology. The irony that his betrayal would finally allow me to step into the light and claim my true legacy was not lost on me. My phone buzzed again with a text from Sophia. Dinner concluding at Laurent's, champagne ordered, appears to be a celebration? I smiled faintly, imagining Richard and Vanessa toasting their future together, personal and professional plans built entirely on foundations Richard didn't own and never had. Continue monitoring, I texted back. Particular interest in any discussion of timelines or announcements. Tomorrow would bring the first small cracks in Richard's carefully constructed reality. The property access clarifications would seem like a minor administrative issue at first, a corporate technicality to be sorted out with a few phone calls. By this time next week, those small cracks would have spread and deepened into chasms, revealing the true structure of the world Richard thought he understood. And I would be there to witness the moment when Richard Mercer finally realized that the woman he'd discarded, after 20 years, was not who he thought she was, and never had been. The chess pieces were in motion, the strategy was set, and Richard, who had never understood the true game being played, was about to discover he'd been merely a pawn all along. Morning arrived with a clarity that matched my mood. I woke at 5:30 a.m., my usual time, and spent an hour on my private treadmill, while reviewing overnight reports from Horizon's Asian facilities. By 7:45, I was showered, dressed in a tailored navy suit, and seated in my hidden office for the 8 a.m. briefing on the Dresden discovery. The carbon nanotube technology appears to have been developed by a small team working directly under the former CTO, James Liu explained as technical specifications filled my center screen. They kept it off official records to avoid disclosure. Requirements during the acquisition process. A retention strategy, I observed. They plan to leave after the acquisition and take the technology with them. Exactly, James confirmed. But they didn't anticipate our enhanced security protocols. When our integration team conducted the standard technical inventory, the secure server compartmentalization was flagged immediately. I studied the performance metrics with growing satisfaction. If verified in production, this technology would put Horizon at least 3 years ahead of our closest competitors. Status of the development team? I asked. Currently contained within the facility. They've been told it's standard post-acquisition assessment protocol. Offer them retention. Packages, I decided. Double their current compensation, 5-year contracts, full integration into our advanced research division. Make it clear that attempting to remove or duplicate this technology would trigger immediate legal consequences. And if they refuse, then they leave with nothing but their personal effects and comprehensive non-compete agreements. My tone left no room for negotiation. This technology belongs to Horizon now. After concluding the briefing, I checked the surveillance feed from Richard's office. He had arrived earlier than usual, already at his desk reviewing documents for his European spin-off proposal. At 8:30 precisely, his assistant, not Vanessa, but a young man who handled administrative tasks since Vanessa had been elevated to Special Projects Coordinator, entered with the morning mail. I watched as Richard sorted through the envelopes, pausing when he reached the 3 identical letters from Horizon Luxury Holdings. His brow furrowed as he opened the first one, concerning the Aspen property. The confusion on his face deepened as he read, then quickly tore open the other 2 letters regarding the Hamptons and Lake Como properties. He immediately reached for his phone, dialing the number provided in the letters. I switched to the audio feed. "This is Richard Mercer," he said when the call connected. I've received letters regarding property access that must be some kind of mistake. The respondent was Thomas Wright's assistant, briefed for this exact call. Good morning, Mr. Mercer. There's no mistake, sir. The properties in question are owned by Horizon Luxury Holdings, a subsidiary of Horizon Industries. Your access has been provided as a courtesy due to your executive position at Mercer Solutions. With your pending departure, access privileges are being reviewed. Pending departure? What are you talking about? I'm the COO of Mercer Solutions. I'm not departing. There was a pause on the line. Our records indicate a status change notification. Filed yesterday, sir. If this is incorrect, you'll need to contact your HR department for clarification. Richard's face reddened. This is absurd. I purchased those properties. They belong to me, not some corporate entity I've never heard of. I understand your confusion, sir. However, our records clearly show that all payments, maintenance costs, and tax obligations for these properties have been handled by Horizon Luxury Holdings since their acquisition. If you'd like to dispute this, I can transfer you to our legal department? Yes, transfer me immediately. After a brief hold, Thomas Wright himself came on the line. Mr. Mercer, Thomas Wright, Chief Counsel for Horizon Industries. How can I help you? You can help me by explaining why your company is claiming ownership of my personal properties, Richard demanded, his composure slipping. There's no claim being made, Mr. Mercer. Horizon Luxury Holdings has owned these properties for years. The Aspen Chalet was purchased 12 years ago, the Hamptons residence 9 years ago, and the Lake Como Villa 7 years ago. All maintenance, taxes, and staff have been paid through Horizon accounts since acquisition. That's impossible. I've been paying for those properties myself. I'm afraid that's incorrect, Thomas replied calmly. If you check your personal financial records, you'll find no payments related to these properties. No mortgage, no property. Taxes, no maintenance costs. I watched as Richard frantically opened his financial management software, searching for evidence to contradict Thomas's statement. His growing frustration was evident as he found nothing, because there was nothing to find. Every payment he believed he'd made had been carefully constructed accounting fiction, designed to maintain his illusion of financial control, while the actual expenses were handled through my corporate structure. This doesn't make sense, Richard muttered, more to himself than to Thomas. How could I not know this? I can't speak to that, Mr. Mercer. I can only confirm the legal ownership status of the properties in question. Who owns Horizon Industries? Richard demanded suddenly. I want to speak to someone in charge. Horizon is a privately held corporation with a complex ownership structure, Thomas replied, the answer carefully rehearsed. I'm not authorized to discuss ownership details. This is ridiculous, Richard snapped. I'm going to get to the bottom of this. Of course, sir. In the meantime, I should inform you that the access codes to all 3 properties have been changed, effective immediately. If you had plans to visit any of these locations, you'll need to postpone until the access review is complete. Richard ended the call without another word, his face a study in confusion and anger. He immediately dialed another number, Vanessa's extension. When she answered, he switched to speakerphone. We have a problem, he said without preamble. The Aspen trip is off. What? Why? Vanessa's voice carried clear disappointment. Some corporate nonsense about the chalet being owned by a holding company, not me personally. They've revoked our access pending a review. Can they do that? Apparently they can, Richard replied, frustration evident. I'm looking into it. Someone's playing games, and I intend to find out who. After ending the call with Vanessa, Richard spent the next hour making increasingly agitated phone calls to his personal lawyer, to the property management companies, even to his bank, trying to track down records of payments he believed he'd made but that had never actually existed. I watched his mounting frustration with clinical detachment, noting the precise moment when confusion gave way to suspicion. He began searching online for information about Horizon Industries, finding only the carefully curated public profile my team maintained, a privately held manufacturing conglomerate with diverse holdings and a reputation for reclusiveness. 10:15, Richard's office door opened again, and Vanessa entered. I adjusted the audio to capture their conversation. "Any progress?" she asked, closing the door behind her. Richard shook his head, gesturing toward his computer screen. Horizon Industries is a black box. Privately held, minimal public footprint. I can't even figure out who runs it. How is that possible in this day and age? Vanessa perched on the edge of his desk, her expression thoughtful. Every company has a digital trail. Not this one, apparently. Richard ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I recognized from our marriage as a sign of deep frustration. The most I can find is that it's been in operation for about 25 years, specializes in advanced manufacturing technology, and has subsidiaries across multiple sectors including real estate and luxury properties. And one of those subsidiaries somehow owns your vacation homes, Vanessa concluded. That's strange. It's more than strange, Richard muttered. It doesn't make sense. Those properties were purchased with my money, as rewards for my success at Mercer Solutions. An uncomfortable silence fell between them as the implication hung in the air. If Richard hadn't actually paid for the properties he believed were his, where had the money come from? And more importantly, why had he been allowed to believe they were his for all these years? Richard, Vanessa began carefully, do you think this could have something to do with Eleanor? I leaned forward slightly, curious about his response. Eleanor? He looked genuinely surprised by the suggestion. How could it? She never had anything to do with my business affairs. She was your wife for 20 years, Vanessa pointed out. And this happened immediately after you told her you were leaving. Richard considered this, brow furrowed. It's a coincidence. Eleanor doesn't have the resources or connections to orchestrate something like this. She was a small business owner who gave up her career to support mine. She has no link to Horizon Industries. I smiled faintly at his certainty, at the effectiveness of the role I'd played for 2 decades. Still, Vanessa persisted, the timing is suspicious. Even if she wanted to retaliate, this isn't her style. Eleanor is practical, straightforward. She's not the type for elaborate schemes. Richard shook his head dismissively. No, this is some corporate maneuver, probably related to the restructuring proposal. Someone got wind of my plans and is trying to pressure me. By taking away your vacation homes? Vanessa sounded skeptical. It's a power play, Richard insisted. Someone showing they can affect my personal life if I push forward with the European spin-off. So what do we do? Richard's expression hardened with determination. We accelerate, move up the timeline. I'll request an emergency board meeting. For Monday instead of waiting until Thursday. Is that wise? If someone's trying to pressure you, it's the only way to respond to pressure. Richard cut her off. Push back harder. I've built Mercer Solutions into what it is today. The board will listen to me. I watched as he picked up his phone and dialed the number for the chairman of the Mercer Solutions board, a mid-level executive within my larger corporate structure, selected specifically for his impressive title but limited actual authority. Charles, Richard greeted when the call connected. I need to schedule an emergency board meeting for Monday morning. It's regarding the European division. Yes, I know it's short notice, but this is time sensitive. Perfect. 9 a.m. works. Thank you. After ending the call, Richard turned to Vanessa with renewed confidence. It's done. Monday morning, 9 a.m. We'll present the restructuring proposal then. What about the property issue? Vanessa asked. One battle at a time, Richard replied. Once the restructuring is approved and I'm established as CEO of the European division, I'll have more leverage to address these property questions. I closed the surveillance feed, having seen enough. Richard's response was exactly as I'd anticipated. Rather than retreating in the face of unexpected challenges, he was doubling down, accelerating his plans, convinced of his own indispensability. It was time to adjust my strategy accordingly. I opened a secure channel to Sophia. Richard's requesting an emergency board meeting for Monday at 9 a.m. to present his restructuring proposal. I'm aware, Sophia replied. Charles contacted me immediately after Richard's call. Move up our board meeting to tomorrow, I decided. Saturday 2 p.m., full attendance required in person. Sophia's eyebrows rose slightly. That's aggressive timing. Some board members may push back. They'll attend, I said with quiet certainty. Make it clear that this is non-negotiable. And the Mercer Solutions board meeting on Monday? Let it proceed as scheduled. But I want you there, Sophia, as my representative. A smile spread across her face as she understood my intention. Of course, Ms. Blackwood. It will be my pleasure. After concluding my call with Sophia, I spent the next hour reviewing the dossier we'd compiled on Vanessa Carter. Her background was impressive. MBA from Wharton, 3 years at a respected consulting firm before joining Mercer Solutions 6 months ago. Her performance evaluations were consistently excellent, her advancement rapid even before catching Richard's personal attention. In many ways, she reminded me of a younger version of myself, ambitious, intelligent, strategic. But unlike me, she'd hitched her rising star to a man who wasn't what he appeared to be. I wondered how she would react when the truth was revealed. Would she stay with Richard once she discovered his success had been carefully managed from above? Or would her ambition lead her to seek opportunity elsewhere? It was a question worth considering as I planned my next moves. My phone buzzed with a text from Richard. Need to postpone moving out until Sunday. Business emergency. We'll explain later. I replied simply. Understood. The business emergency was, of course, his scramble to prepare for the accelerated board meeting. He would be working through the weekend, refining his pitch, gathering supportive data, building his case for why he should be entrusted with control of the European division. It was almost poignant, the effort he would put into a presentation that was already doomed to failure. At noon, I left my hidden office and drove to a private airfield outside the city, where Horizon's corporate jet waited to bring our board members in for tomorrow's meeting. As the owner of a multinational corporation with operations across 4 continents, I'd long ago mastered the art of efficient travel arrangements. By this time tomorrow, all 12 members of Horizon's actual governing board would be assembled in our corporate headquarters' top-floor boardroom, a room Richard had never seen, in a building he'd passed countless times without realizing its significance. The jet was preparing for takeoff to collect our board member from Tokyo when my secure phone rang. It was Thomas Wright. Ms. Blackwood, I thought you should know that Mr. Mercer has retained outside counsel to investigate the property ownership situation. As expected, I replied, watching the jet taxi toward the runway. Let them investigate. Everything is properly documented. There's something else, Thomas continued. He's also requested all financial records for Mercer Solutions going back 5 years, specifically focusing on funding sources and ownership structure. This was slightly ahead of schedule, but not concerning. Provide everything that's appropriate for his clearance level. Of course, but he's likely to notice the gaps. That's the intention, Thomas. I smiled faintly. Let him see just enough to raise questions he can't answer. After ending the call, I returned to my car and drove to Valtari for another lunch. Meeting, this time with James Liu to discuss the Dresden technology integration. As I waited for him to arrive, I received an encrypted message from Sophia with a video file attached. The timestamp showed it had been recorded just 20 minutes earlier. Richard in his office, on a video call with his newly retained lawyer. I activated the audio. I need answers, Patricia, Richard was saying, his frustration evident. How can properties I've been using for years, that I believed I owned, actually belong to a company I've never dealt with directly? The split screen showed an older woman with steel gray hair, her expression professionally neutral. The documentation is unambiguous, Richard. These properties are owned by Horizon Luxury Holdings, have been since their purchase. There are no Mortgages in your name, no title transfers, nothing to support your belief that you owned them. Then how have I been using them exclusively for years? Why would this company allow that? The letters suggest it was a courtesy extended based on your position at Mercer Solutions. That implies some kind of relationship between Mercer Solutions and Horizon Industries. Richard's expression shifted from frustration to dawning suspicion. I've requested the complete financial records for Mercer Solutions. If there's a connection, I'll find it. I should warn you, the lawyer said carefully. If you're planning to attempt a corporate restructuring while simultaneously investigating your own company's ownership, you're entering treacherous waters. Horizon Industries appears to be a significant entity with considerable resources. I've built Mercer Solutions from a small manufacturing firm into a global player, Richard replied, his pride evident. If someone else has been pulling strings, behind the scenes, I deserve to know who and why. I closed the video, thoughtful. Richard was beginning to ask the right questions, but he was still fundamentally misunderstanding the situation. He hadn't built Mercer Solutions. I had. He'd merely been the public face, the frontman executing strategies designed by others, advancing through a corporate structure specifically built to contain and direct his ambition. James arrived for our lunch, and I set aside thoughts of Richard to focus on the technical details of integrating the Dresden discovery into our existing product lines. This was the real work of building a company, identifying technological advantages, strategically deploying resources, staying ahead of market trends through innovation and acquisition. It was work Richard had never truly understood or participated in, despite his belief to the contrary. By the time I returned home in the late afternoon, Richard had sent another text. Working late, need to prepare for important meeting Monday. We'll get remaining things Sunday instead of tomorrow. I replied, with a simple acknowledgement, then descended to my hidden office to make final preparations for tomorrow's board meeting. In less than 24 hours, I would step into the light as Eleanor Blackwood, abandoning the shadow role I'd played for 20 years. The necessary documents were prepared. Identity verification for board members who had never met me in person. Comprehensive assessments of Richard's performance as a corporate frontman. Statistical analysis of Mercer Solutions' position within the larger Horizon structure. Everything was in place for the reveal that would fundamentally alter the course of Richard's professional life, just as his decision to leave me had altered our personal relationship. As I reviewed the final presentation decks, a peculiar sense of lightness came over me. For 20 years, I'd maintained an elaborate dual identity, the corporate wife in public, the CEO in private. The compartmentalization had been necessary when I first built the company, a shield against the gender biases and preconceptions that might have limited my success had my identity been known. Richard had been a useful part of that strategy, his ego and ambition making him the perfect unwitting front for a portion of my operations. For years, that arrangement had served my purposes. But now, as I prepared to step out of the shadows, I realized how much energy had been expended maintaining the facade. How much of myself had been hidden away, not just from the world, but from my own daily existence. Tomorrow would change everything, for Richard certainly, but also for me. After 20 years of playing a role, I was about to reclaim my true identity. Eleanor Blackwood was ready to emerge from the shadows, and Richard Mercer was about to discover just how little he had ever really known about the woman he'd married, the company he thought he helped build, or the true power he had so carelessly dismissed. The chessboard was set, the pieces were positioned, and tomorrow would bring the unexpected move that Richard had never seen coming. The revelation that the Queen had been controlling the game all along. Saturday morning dawned clear and crisp, the autumn sunlight painting golden patterns across the hardwood floors of my bedroom. I'd slept soundly, waking refreshed and focused, my mind already mapping out the day ahead. Richard had not returned home the previous night, presumably staying at his leased downtown apartment with Vanessa as they prepared for Monday's meeting. Selected my wardrobe with particular care. A charcoal gray Armani suit with subtle navy pinstripes, a silk blouse in deep burgundy, and the diamond studs that had been my grandmother's. Professional, powerful, but not ostentatious. The perfect attire for Eleanor Blackwood's first in-person board meeting in 15 years. At my dressing table, I studied my reflection as I applied minimal makeup with practiced precision. The face looking back at me was composed, controlled. The face of a woman who had built a multi-billion-dollar corporation from nothing while maintaining a perfect cover identity. There was a certain satisfaction in knowing that after today, I would no longer need to hide that accomplishment. My secure C. Phone buzzed with a message from Sophia. All board members arrived. Security protocols in place. Meeting room prepared to your specifications. Perfect, I replied. ETA 45 minutes. One final review in the mirror confirmed I was ready. Not just in appearance, but in resolve. Today marked the beginning of the end of my double life. The first step in reclaiming my full identity after 20 years of careful concealment. I drove myself to Horizon Tower in the sleek Aston Martin I kept in the garage but rarely used. Richard believed it was a remnant of my impractical past, an indulgence I'd refused to give up when we married. In reality, it was one of the few authentic expressions of my personal taste that I'd allowed to remain visible during our marriage. Horizon Tower stood 45 stories high in the heart of the financial district, its glass and steel facade reflecting the morning sunlight. Richard had passed this building countless times over the years, never knowing it housed the true corporate headquarters of the company he believed he helped run. Mercer Solutions occupied a much smaller building in the manufacturing district, a deliberate separation I'd maintained to ensure the two worlds never collided. I parked in the private underground garage, using a key card Richard had never seen, and took the executive elevator directly to the top floor. As the doors opened, Sophia was waiting, tablet in hand, her expression composed but with an undercurrent of anticipation. "Good morning, Ms. Blackwood," she greeted me formally, conscious of the nearby security personnel. "The board is assembling. In the main conference room, final security checks are complete." "Thank you, Sophia." I stepped out of the elevator, taking a moment to absorb the familiar yet strange sensation of being physically present in my own corporate headquarters. "Status update on Richard?" "Still at his office," Sophia reported as we walked toward the conference room. "He's been there since 6 a.m. preparing for Monday's presentation. Our surveillance indicates he's also continuing to investigate Horizon Industries, with limited success." "And Vanessa?" "Joined him at 7:30. They appear to be working separately, he on the presentation, she on background research about Horizon. She's proving more resourceful than anticipated, but our information firewalls are holding." I nodded, unsurprised. Vanessa's ambition and intelligence had been evident from her file. "Any contact from Richard's lawyer?" "She's filed formal information requests with 3 different regulatory agencies, attempting to trace Horizon's ownership structure." Sophia's lips curved in a slight smile. "All requests are being processed through standard channels, which ensures no meaningful information will be available until well after Monday's meeting." We paused outside the massive oak doors of the main conference room. Through the frosted glass panels, I could see the silhouettes of the board members taking their seats, 12 of the most powerful individuals in global manufacturing and technology, all of whom had worked with me for years but only via secure video conferences. "Are you ready for this?" Sophia asked quietly, a rare personal question from my usually professional CFO. "I've been ready for 20 years, I replied. It was only a question of timing. With a nod to the security officer, the doors were opened, and I walked into the room that had been the virtual center of my professional existence for 2 decades. Conversation stopped immediately as 12 heads turned toward me. I recognized each face from countless video calls, though they were seeing me in person for the first time. Their expressions ranged from curiosity to surprise to admiration. "Good afternoon," I said, moving with measured confidence to the head of the table. "Thank you all for adjusting your schedules on such short notice." Marcus Chen, chairman of the board and the longest-serving member, rose to his feet. "Ms. Blackwood, it's an honor to finally meet you in person." His voice carried the gravitas, earned through decades in international business. "I believe I speak for the entire board when I say this meeting has been long anticipated." Murmurs of agreement circled the table as I took my seat, Sophia settling into the chair to my right. "I appreciate the sentiment, Marcus," I replied, meeting his gaze directly. "As you all know, I've maintained my privacy for strategic reasons. Throughout Horizon's development, recent events have necessitated a change in that strategy." With a nod to Sophia, the presentation screens around the room activated, displaying an organizational chart of Horizon Industries' complete corporate structure, a complex web of subsidiaries, holding companies, and operational divisions spanning global markets. For those who may not be familiar with all aspects of our corporate architecture, I began. This is the current structure of Horizon Industries. As you can see, Mercer Solutions, I indicated a subsidiary nestled within the manufacturing division, represents approximately 8% of our overall operations, though it has served a valuable purpose as our public-facing entity in certain markets. The board members studied the chart with practiced eyes, immediately grasping the strategic positioning of each division within the larger whole. For 20 years, I continued, Mercer Solutions has been managed through a unique arrangement. A frontman executive who believed he was running an independent company, unaware of Horizon's ownership or my identity as CEO. I paused, allowing the implications to sink in. Most board members were already aware of this arrangement in general terms, though the specifics had been closely guarded. That frontman is Richard Mercer, my husband of 20 years, who recently informed me of his intention to end our marriage. My tone remained professional, matter of fact. While our personal relationship is irrelevant to this discussion, his simultaneous attempt to restructure Horizon's European operations without authorization is not. With another nod to Sophia, the screens changed to display Richard's confidential restructuring proposal, the one he believed he would present to his board on Monday. As you can see, Mr. Mercer is planning to propose spinning off our European division as a separate entity, with himself as CEO and his current romantic partner as COO. I allowed a trace of irony to color my voice. He believes he has the authority to make this proposal to what he perceives as the governing board of Mercer Solutions on Monday morning. Marcus leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. This is rather ambitious for a subsidiary executive. Ambition has never been Richard's shortcoming, I acknowledged. His failing is in not recognizing the limits of his actual authority. "And you've allowed him to operate under this misapprehension for 20 years?" asked Diane Fujimoto, who headed our Asian operations. "Why?" It was a fair question, one I'd anticipated. When I founded Horizon 25 years ago, the technology manufacturing sector was even more dominated by men than it is today, I explained. Having Richard as the public face of a portion of our operations provided strategic advantages. Contracts that might have been more difficult to secure, partnerships that opened more readily to a male CEO, opportunities that presented themselves based on perception rather than reality. I gestured to the organizational chart still visible on a secondary screen. As Horizon grew and diversified, maintaining this arrangement became less about external advantages and more about operational efficiency. Richard executed the strategies we designed, believing they were his own initiatives, while we focused on building the larger enterprise. Understanding nods circled the table. These were business leaders who recognized pragmatic strategy when they saw it. In recent days, I continued, Richard has become aware of certain discrepancies in what he believed to be his personal assets, specifically properties actually owned by Horizon that he was permitted to use as part of his executive compensation package. The screens shifted again to display the formal letters regarding the vacation properties. This discovery has prompted him to begin investigating Horizon's ownership structure, though he has not yet made the connection to me personally. I folded my hands on the table. Given these developments, I believe it's time to clarify the actual corporate structure and eliminate the unnecessary complications of maintaining Richard's illusion of autonomy. What exactly are you proposing, Eleanor? Asked Marcus, using my first name as he often did in our private communications. A corporate restructuring of our own, I replied. One that accurately reflects the actual operational reality of Horizon Industries. For the next 45 minutes, I outlined my plan for consolidating Horizon's public-facing operations, eliminating the artificial separation between Mercer Solutions and our other divisions, and streamlining our global management structure. The board engaged actively, asking pointed questions and offering strategic refinements to the proposal. By the time we called for a vote, the plan had evolved into something even stronger than my original concept, a testament to why I'd selected these particular individuals for my board in the first place. The proposal passes unanimously, Marcus announced after the vote. Implementation to begin immediately, with public announcement scheduled for Monday morning. Which brings us to our final item of business, I said, nodding to Sophia, who distributed sealed folders to each board member. The Richard Mercer situation. The board members opened their folders, reviewing the detailed assessment of Richard's performance as the frontman CEO of Mercer Solutions over the past 20 years. The data was comprehensive and unsparing, his strengths acknowledged, his weaknesses documented, his actual contributions to Horizon's success quantified precisely. As you can see, I continued as they absorbed the information. While Mr. Mercer has served adequately in his role, he is ultimately replaceable. The question before us is whether to retain his services in a clarified capacity or to terminate the relationship entirely. What do you recommend, Eleanor? Asked Marcus, setting down the folder. I believe in making decisions based on data, not emotion, I replied evenly. The data suggests Richard's value to Horizon has been primarily as a figurehead, not as a strategic contributor. With our new consolidated structure, that role becomes redundant. Nods of agreement circled the table. These were business leaders who understood the necessity of difficult personnel decisions. However, I continued, there is also value in how we handle this transition. Richard Mercer may not be essential to our operations, but his departure will be visible. How we manage that visibility has implications for our corporate reputation. You're suggesting we offer him a position within the restructured organization? Diane asked, her tone suggesting skepticism. I'm suggesting we offer him a choice, I clarified. A properly defined role with clear reporting structures and limited authority, or a severance package commensurate with his years of service but accompanied by comprehensive non-compete and confidentiality agreements. And if he rejects both options? This from Harold Winters, our chief risk officer. Then we proceed with standard termination protocols for an executive found to be attempting unauthorized restructuring, I replied coolly. The documentation is already prepared, Marcus studied me thoughtfully. You've considered all contingencies, as always. It's what I do, I said simply. When do you plan to inform Richard of these developments? Asked Diane. Monday morning, I replied. Sophia will attend the Mercer Solutions board meeting on my behalf. When Richard presents his unauthorized restructuring proposal, she will clarify the actual corporate structure and present our decision regarding his future with Horizon. You won't be there yourself? Marcus seemed surprised. I will be addressing our shareholders via livestream at precisely the same time, announcing our corporate consolidation and my first public appearance as CEO in 20 years. I allowed myself a small smile. Richard will be welcome to watch the stream along with everyone else. A ripple of appreciation moved through the board. The timing was impeccable. Richard would be confronted with the truth about his position while simultaneously watching me claim public ownership of the company he thought he helped build. One final question, said Marcus. What about Vanessa? Carter? Our assessment indicates she's actually quite talented, despite her personal involvement with Richard. I nodded, having anticipated this question. Ms. Carter's abilities are indeed impressive. Her poor judgment in personal relationships notwithstanding, she could be an asset in the right position. I've prepared a conditional offer for her as, well, contingent on her immediate termination of both professional and personal ties with Richard. Ruthless, commented Harold with grudging admiration. Strategic, I corrected. Talent is valuable, but so is loyalty. As the meeting concluded and board members began to depart, Marcus lingered, approaching me privately. 20 years is a long. Time to wait for recognition, Eleanor, he said quietly. Are you certain you're ready for the public scrutiny that will follow Monday's announcement? I'm not waiting for recognition, Marcus, I replied. I'm simply removing an outdated operational constraint. The company's needs have evolved, and our structure is evolving with them. He studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. Nevertheless, stepping into the public eye after so many years of privacy will be an adjustment. I've made more difficult adjustments. I gathered my materials, signaling the end of our conversation. The transition plan is solid. By this time next quarter, Richard Mercer will be nothing more than a footnote in Horizon's history. After the board members had departed, Sophia and I returned to my private office on the floor below, a space Richard didn't know existed, in a building he didn't know I controlled. The surveillance team reports increased activity at Richard's office, Sophia informed me, checking her tablet. He's called in several department heads for weekend meetings, apparently building support for his proposal. Let him, I replied, settling behind my desk. Each person he brings into his confidence becomes another witness to Monday's revelation. He's also made 3 more attempts to contact the property management companies for the vacation properties, Sophia continued. All have referred him back to Horizon Luxury Holdings per protocol. I nodded, unsurprised by Richard's persistence. It was one of the qualities that had made him an effective frontman. Once committed to a course of action, he pursued it doggedly. What about Vanessa? Any indication she's connecting the dots? She's more perceptive than Richard, Sophia acknowledged. She's been researching corporate registration documents and has identified several connections between Mercer Solutions and Horizon subsidiaries. But she hasn't made the leap to your involvement yet. She will, I predicted. Probably before Richard does. Her ambition makes her more attuned to power structures. I turned to the wall of monitors displaying real-time data from Horizon's global operations, manufacturing metrics from our Asian facilities, research updates from our European labs, market performance indicators from our financial division. This was the actual nerve center of the company I'd built, not the sanitized executive suite Richard occupied at Mercer Solutions. Everything is proceeding according to schedule for Monday's announcement, Sophia reported. The shareholder communication has been finalized, press materials prepared, and the live stream technical setup verified. Your official biography has been updated for release, highlighting your role as founder and CEO from inception. And the Dresden integration? James reports the retention offers have been accepted by the key development team members. Initial production tests of the carbon nanotube technology are exceeding projections. I nodded, satisfied. Even as my personal life underwent its most significant transformation in 20 years, the company I'd built continued to thrive and evolve. It was a reminder of what had always been most important to me, not the role I played as Richard's wife, but the empire I'd created through vision and strategic patience. One last thing, Sophia said, her tone shifting slightly. Security noted Richard making an appointment with a private investigator yesterday. The PI specializes in financial forensics and hidden asset searches. I smiled faintly. A bit late. For that, isn't it? Perhaps, Sophia acknowledged. But it suggests he's beginning to suspect there's more to the situation than a simple corporate ownership dispute. Let him investigate, I replied calmly. By the time his PI uncovers anything, Meaningful, Monday's announcement will have rendered the investigation moot. Sophia hesitated, then asked the question that had likely been on her mind since Richard's text announcing the end of our marriage. After Monday, after everything is revealed, what happens to Richard personally? I considered the question carefully. Despite 20 years of marriage, Richard and I had never truly been partners in any meaningful sense. Our relationship had been built on his misconceptions and my strategic needs. There was no deep emotional bond to mourn, no genuine connection being severed. Richard will experience the natural consequences of his choices, I said finally. He chose to leave his wife for his assistant, not realizing his wife was also his boss. He chose to attempt a corporate restructuring without proper authority. He chose to believe himself the architect of a success that was orchestrated by others. I turned from the monitors to face Sophia directly. I'm not seeking revenge if that's what you're asking. I'm simply allowing reality to reassert itself after 20 years of carefully maintained illusion. Sophia nodded, understanding. And after Monday? Once your public identity as Eleanor Blackwood is established? Then I continue building what I've always been building, I replied simply. A company that stands at the forefront of manufacturing. Technology that shapes markets rather than responding to them, that creates value through innovation and strategic foresight. I glanced at the single personal photo on my desk, not of Richard, but of my father in his small factory 30 years ago, before corporate raiders destroyed his business and inspired my determination to build something they could never take away. The only difference, I continued, is that I'll be doing it in the light as myself, rather than through proxies and facades. As Sophia departed to oversee final preparations for Monday's announcement, I remained in my office, reviewing the complete surveillance report from Richard's weekend activities. His increasing frustration was evident in every communication, every futile attempt to unravel the mystery of Horizon Industries before his Monday presentation. It was almost poetic, watching him struggle to understand a truth that had been present throughout our entire marriage, that his success had never truly been his own, that he had been playing a role in someone else's strategy without ever realizing it. By Monday afternoon, that struggle would end. Richard would finally understand who he had been married to for 20 years, who had actually built the company he claimed as his achievement, who had orchestrated the career he believed was self-made. And I would finally step fully into the identity I had maintained in the shadows for 2 decades. Eleanor Blackwood, founder and CEO of Horizon Industries, one of the most successful corporate leaders of her generation. The anticipation of that moment brought a rare smile to my face as I continued preparing for the day that would change everything. Sunday passed, with meticulous attention to detail, the hallmark of how I'd built Horizon Industries and how I would now orchestrate the most significant corporate revelation of my career. I spent the morning in my home office, reviewing the shareholder presentation one final time, while surveillance feeds showed Richard and Vanessa working frantically in his office, polishing their doomed restructuring proposal. Shortly after noon, Richard texted, "Need to push moving out to next weekend. Critical business situation. We'll explain soon." I responded with deliberate neutrality. "That's fine. Good luck with your meeting tomorrow." His reply came quickly. "Thank you for understanding." The brief exchange carried layers of irony that Richard couldn't begin to comprehend. He believed he was managing a personal separation while preparing for his greatest professional triumph. In reality, both aspects of his life were about to be fundamentally redefined by forces he'd never recognized. At 3 p.m., I participated in a final coordination call with my executive team, the select group who had always known my true identity and had helped maintain the elaborate corporate structure that kept Eleanor Blackwood separate from Eleanor Mercer for 2 decades. "All preparations are complete for tomorrow's announcement," reported Thomas Wright, reviewing his legal checklist. "The SEC filings reflecting our corporate consolidation have been prepared for submission immediately following the shareholder address." Media packets are ready for distribution, added Adrian Foster, our communications director. We anticipate significant coverage, particularly around your emergence as founder and CEO after years of operating in the background. The personal narrative has been carefully calibrated, Adrian continued. It positions your decision to remain private until now as a strategic choice rather than any attempt at deception, emphasizing how this approach allowed Horizon to develop, without the distraction of personality-focused coverage. Excellent, I nodded. And the timeline for tomorrow? Sophia took over, outlining the precisely choreographed sequence of events we had planned. 15 a.m. Security team arrives at Mercer Solutions to prepare the boardroom. 8:30 a.m. I arrive with legal team and take position in the adjacent conference room. 8:45 a.m. Mercer Solutions board members begin arriving for Richard's meeting. 8:55 a.m. You begin final preparations for the shareholder live stream. 9 a.m. Richard starts his presentation to the Mercer Solutions board. 9:05 a.m. Initial monitoring of Richard's presentation to assess tone and approach. 9:10 a.m. You begin your shareholder address, announcing the consolidated corporate structure and your role as founder and CEO. 9:12 a.m. On your signal, I enter the Mercer Solutions boardroom with the legal team to interrupt Richard's presentation. 9:15 a.m. As you reveal your identity to shareholders, I simultaneously inform Richard and the Mercer Solutions board of the actual corporate structure and your position as CEO. Perfect synchronization, I commented. Richard will be confronted with the truth at precisely the moment I'm publicly claiming my identity. The psychological impact should be considerable, noted James Liu, who had always appreciated the strategic elegance of our corporate architecture. That's not the primary objective, I reminded him, though we both knew it was a satisfying secondary effect. The timing serves our corporate needs, ensuring the information reaches all relevant parties simultaneously, preventing unauthorized disclosures or market irregularities. After concluding the call, I spent another hour reviewing the DUT's latest intelligence on Richard's activities. He had been researching Horizon Industries with increasing frustration, hitting one dead end after another as he encountered the information firewalls my team had maintained for years. His lawyer had made equally fruitless attempts to trace property, ownership beyond the Horizon Luxury Holdings subsidiary, finding only the carefully constructed labyrinth of holding companies that ultimately led back to me, a connection impossible to establish without internal knowledge. Most interesting was the surveillance from Richard and Vanessa's lunch conversation earlier that day, captured at a restaurant near his office where they'd met to finalize tomorrow's strategy. Something doesn't add up, Vanessa had said, her expression troubled as she reviewed documents on her tablet. I've traced connections between Mercer Solutions and at least 3 Horizon subsidiaries, but I can't find who actually controls the parent company. What kind of connections? Richard had asked, leaning forward with intensity. Financial primarily, capital infusions that coincide exactly with our major expansion periods. Technology transfers that appear to flow from Horizon research divisions to our manufacturing operations. Even personnel movements, specialists who appear on our project, teams with backgrounds at other Horizon subsidiaries. Richard had frowned, his expression darkening. That's impossible. I would have known if another company was controlling our operations to that degree. Would you? Vanessa had challenged quietly. When was the last time you personally reviewed the original capitalization structure of Mercer Solutions? Or traced the intellectual property rights for our core technologies? Or questioned why certain executive decisions were implemented so smoothly while others faced mysterious obstacles? I had watched Richard's face as her questions landed, noting the flicker of uncertainty that passed over his features before his customary confidence reasserted itself. Tomorrow's meeting will proceed as planned, he had declared, setting aside her concerns with the dismissive certainty that had characterized his approach to business for 20 years. Once the board approves our restructuring proposal, we'll have the authority to conduct a full audit of any suspicious connections. Now, reviewing the footage again in my home office, I found myself almost admiring Vanessa's perceptiveness. Where Richard saw only the role he believed he played, she had begun to discern the larger structure behind his illusory position. It confirmed my initial assessment. She was indeed intelligent and strategic, qualities that might make her valuable to Horizon despite her poor judgment in personal relationships. At 6 p.m., my secure phone rang with a call from Marcus Chen. "Eleanor." He greeted me, his tone carrying the weight of his decades of business experience. "Everything is in place for tomorrow. The board members have all confirmed their virtual attendance for the shareholder address." "Thank you, Marcus," I replied, appreciating his personal attention to these details despite his elevated position. "Any concerns from your perspective?" "Only one," he said after a brief hesitation. "Have you considered the personal impact of tomorrow's revelation? Not on Richard, I have no concerns there. But on you?" I paused, considering his question. "What specifically do you mean?" "For 20 years you've operated in the shadows, building something remarkable while maintaining complete privacy. After tomorrow, that privacy will be gone forever. The business press will dissect every aspect of your life, your marriage to Richard will become public fodder. Your decision to remain hidden will be scrutinized from every angle." "I'm prepared for that scrutiny," I assured him. "The narrative we've constructed addresses the most obvious questions while revealing only what serves our purposes." "It's not just about the narrative," Marcus persisted. "It's about the fundamental change in how you'll experience the world. No more anonymity, no more separation between Eleanor Blackwood and your public persona. Are you certain you're ready for that convergence?" His concern was genuine, and I took a moment to consider it. "Seriously, for 20 years I had maintained a rigid separation between my true self and the role I played as Richard's wife. That separation had served both personal and professional purposes, allowing me to build Horizon without the distractions and barriers that might have impeded a visible female founder in a male-dominated industry. The separation has outlived its usefulness," I said finally. "It was a strategic choice when I began building Horizon, and maintaining it made sense as long as the benefits outweighed the costs. But circumstances have changed." "Richard's decision? To end your marriage," Marcus stated, understanding immediately. "That was the catalyst, yes," I acknowledged. "But not the only factor. Horizon has reached a point where its continued growth requires a more unified public presence. The artificial separation between our various divisions creates inefficiencies that can no longer be justified by the original rationale. And on a personal level?" I smiled slightly at his persistence. Marcus had been with me since nearly the beginning, one of the few people who knew the true Eleanor Blackwood, rather than the carefully constructed persona of Eleanor Mercer. "On a personal level," I admitted, "there is a certain liberation in the prospect of integration. 20 years is a long time to maintain a dual identity, Marcus. Perhaps longer than was strictly necessary." "I suspected as much," he replied, satisfaction evident in his tone. "Well then, I look forward to witnessing Eleanor Blackwood's public debut tomorrow. It promises to be quite the corporate event." After ending the call, I descended to my hidden office one last time to review the final surveillance reports before tomorrow's revelation. Richard had returned to his downtown apartment at 5:30 p.m., carrying additional files and his laptop, clearly, planning to continue working through the evening. Vanessa had joined him an hour later, bringing dinner and more documents. Their conversation, captured by the monitoring systems my security team had installed in Richard's new apartment the day after he signed the lease, revealed both his continued confidence and her growing suspicion. "I still think we should delay the presentation until we understand more about Horizon Industries," Vanessa was saying as they spread documents across his dining table. Something about this whole situation feels orchestrated. By whom? Richard? Challenged, his tone dismissive. Some shadowy corporate entity that's been manipulating my career for decades? That's paranoid thinking, Vanessa. Is it? She pulled up a document on her tablet. Look at this. The founding documentation for Mercer Solutions. The original incorporation was handled by a law firm that exclusively represents Horizon subsidiaries. The initial funding came from a venture capital group that's a shell company for Horizon Investments. Even the intellectual property rights for our core technologies are held by another Horizon subsidiary that licenses them back to us under terms so favorable they make no commercial sense. I watched as Richard frowned at the documents, his expression cycling through confusion, disbelief, and the beginnings of genuine concern. If what you're suggesting is true, he said slowly, then my entire career at Mercer Solutions has been, what? Some kind of elaborate corporate fiction? I don't know, Vanessa admitted. But I think we need to find out before we propose taking a significant division independent. If Horizon Industries actually controls Mercer Solutions to this degree, our restructuring proposal could be interpreted as an attempted corporate theft. Richard shook his head, rejecting the uncomfortable implications of her analysis. You're connecting dots that might not be related. These could be standard corporate arrangements that appear suspicious only because you're looking for conspiracy. Maybe, she conceded. But doesn't it seem strange that all these connections to Horizon Industries are emerging right after you told Eleanor you were leaving her? And right after you suddenly lost access to vacation properties you thought you owned? I watched Richard's face closely as her question registered, noting the exact moment when the first glimmer of suspicion regarding my potential involvement appeared in his expression. Eleanor, he said, the name almost a question. What could she possibly have to do with Horizon Industries? I don't know, Vanessa replied. But the timing is remarkable. Richard fell silent, considering this new possibility. I could almost see him mentally reviewing our 20-year marriage, searching for any indication that I was more than the supportive corporate wife I'd pretended to be. No, he said finally, definitively. Eleanor has no connection to Horizon Industries or any other significant corporate entity. She gave up her small business when we married to support my career. I would have known if she maintained other business interests. His certainty was almost touching in its complete misapprehension of reality. For 20 years, Richard had seen exactly what he expected to see. A wife whose identity was subordinate to his, whose ambitions had been set aside in service to his success, whose occasional business insights were amusing oddities rather than glimpses of her true expertise. If you're certain, Vanessa said, clearly unconvinced but unwilling to press the point further, then let's finish preparing for tomorrow's presentation. I closed the surveillance feed, having seen enough to confirm that our timing for tomorrow's revelation was optimal. Richard was beginning to sense that something was amiss but remained fundamentally blind to the true nature of his situation. Vanessa was more perceptive, but lacked the specific information needed to make the connection between Eleanor Mercer and Eleanor Blackwood. By this time tomorrow, that connection would be unmistakably clear to both of them, and to the business world at large. I spent the remainder of the evening reviewing Horizon's latest quarterly projections and the integration timeline for the Dresden acquisition, deliberately focusing on the future rather than dwelling on the past represented by my marriage to Richard. His role in my life and in my company had always been instrumental rather than essential, a convenient facade behind which I built something truly significant. As I prepared for bed, I received one final status update from Sophia. All systems ready for tomorrow. Transport scheduled for 8 a.m. to take you to Horizon Tower for the shareholder address. Confirmed, I replied. Has Richard made any further attempts to investigate Horizon's ownership? Yes, came the prompt response. He accessed our corporate registry through a backdoor provided by his private investigator at 9:30 p.m. He reached the same dead ends as previous attempts. And his current status? Still working on his presentation with Vanessa. Latest version, obtained through our surveillance, indicates no substantive changes to the restructuring proposal. I set my phone aside, satisfied that everything was proceeding according to plan. Richard would walk into tomorrow's meeting with the same confidence he'd displayed throughout our marriage, the unwavering belief in his own central importance, to a story that had always been primarily about someone else. Morning arrived with the crystalline clarity that often accompanies momentous days. I awoke at 5 a.m. earlier than usual and spent an hour in my private gym, the physical exertion helping to focus my mind on the day ahead. By 7 a.m., I was dressed, in a custom Chanel suit in deep navy, professional, powerful, but not ostentatious. The perfect attire for Eleanor Blackwood's public debut as the founder and CEO of Horizon Industries. As I applied my makeup with practiced precision, I studied my reflection in the mirror. The face looking back at me had played two distinct roles. For 20 years, the supportive corporate wife in public, the visionary CEO in private. After today, those roles would merge into a single identity, one that would be scrutinized, analyzed, and discussed in business circles around the world. Marcus had been right to question whether I was prepared for that transition. The privacy of the past 20 years had provided a certain freedom, the ability to build something remarkable without the distractions of public attention or the added barriers that female executives often faced in the technology manufacturing sector. But that privacy had come at a cost. The constant compartmentalization of my life, the energy expended maintaining a facade, the necessity of watching Richard take public credit for initiatives that had been entirely my creation. As I fastened the diamond studs that had been my grandmother's, the same ones I'd worn to my first in-person board meeting yesterday, I felt a sense of completion rather than apprehension. Today wasn't just about revealing the truth to Richard or correcting a public misconception about Horizon's leadership. It was about reclaiming the integrated identity I'd set aside 20 years ago for strategic purposes that had now been fulfilled. At 7:45 a.m., the secure car arrived to transport me to Horizon Tower. As we pulled away from the house Richard still believed we shared, I received the first status update from Sophia. Security team in position at Mercer Solutions. Richard arrived at 7:30 a.m., Vanessa at 7:40 a.m., both in his office reviewing presentation materials. Acknowledged, I replied. Proceed as scheduled. The morning traffic flowed smoothly, as if cooperating with the precision of our timeline. I arrived at Horizon Tower at 8:20 a.m., taking the executive elevator directly to the top floor, where my team waited in the specially prepared broadcast studio. Good morning, Ms. Blackwood, greeted Adrian Foster, our communications director. Everything is ready for the shareholder address. The secure link will go live at 9:00 a.m., with approximately 300 major shareholders and analysts expected to attend virtually. And the media distribution? I asked, settling into the chair as a technician adjusted the lighting. Press packets will be sent simultaneously with the start of your address, Adrian confirmed. We anticipate initial reporting within minutes of your announcement. At 8:45 a.m., Sophia's update arrived. Mercer Solutions board members all present. Richard scheduled to begin at 9 a.m. I'm in position with legal team in the adjacent conference room. Perfect, I replied. Maintain observation and await my signal. The final minutes before 9 a.m. passed in a focused calm as I reviewed my speaking points one last time. This was not merely a corporate announcement, but a personal declaration, the moment when Eleanor Blackwood would step out of the shadows and claim her rightful position as the architect of Horizon Industries' success. At precisely 9 a.m., the livestream connection activated, showing the gallery view of shareholders and analysts joining from around the world. Simultaneously, I received Sophia's confirmation. Richard has begun his presentation. The moment had arrived. With a nod to the broadcast technician, I began the address that would change everything, for Horizon Industries, for Richard Mercer, and for the woman who had built an empire while letting her husband believe it was his. "Good morning," I began, my voice calm and authoritative. "I am Eleanor Blackwood, founder and chief executive officer of Horizon Industries. Today marks a significant evolution in our corporate structure and the end of 20 years of strategic privacy regarding my role as the architect of Horizon's global success." As my introduction echoed through the broadcast studio, I could see the ripple of surprise pass through the gallery of shareholders on my monitor. Though they had been informed that the CEO of Horizon Industries would be addressing them directly, for the first time, the identity of that CEO had remained confidential until this moment. "For 25 years," I continued, my voice steady and measured, "Horizon Industries has pioneered advancements in manufacturing technology across multiple sectors. What began as a small specialized operation has grown into a global leader, with operations on 4 continents and technological innovations that drive numerous industries." On a secondary screen, I could see the real-time monitoring of Richard's presentation at Mercer Solutions. He was 5 minutes in, confidently outlining his vision for spinning off the European division as an independent entity under his leadership. The Mercer Solutions board members, middle managers within my larger corporate structure, were listening attentively, unaware that their perceived authority was about to be revealed as an elaborate corporate fiction. "Today marks a strategic evolution for Horizon," I explained to the shareholders. "We are consolidating our operational structure to eliminate unnecessary separations between divisions, streamline decision-making processes, and position ourselves for accelerated growth in emerging markets." I nodded slightly to my communications director, the signal to distribute the detailed press packets to media outlets worldwide. Simultaneously, I tapped a single key on the tablet beside me, the prearranged signal to Sophia that it was time for her entrance at Mercer Solutions. On the monitoring screen, I watched as the door to the Mercer Solutions boardroom opened and Sophia entered, followed by 2 members of our legal team. Richard paused mid-sentence, his expression shifting from confidence to confusion at this unexpected interruption. "I apologize for the interruption," Sophia stated calmly, her voice clear through our surveillance audio. "But there's a matter of significant corporate importance that supersedes this presentation." As Richard began to protest, I returned my full attention to the shareholder address, knowing that Sophia would execute her part of our choreography with precision. "As part of our consolidated structure," I continued, "I am today publicly assuming my role as the visible leader of Horizon Industries. For strategic reasons that served our corporate development, I have maintained privacy regarding my position as founder and CEO for the past 20 years. That privacy, while valuable during our growth phases, is no longer optimal for our current operational objectives." On the screens surrounding me, financial news feeds were already lighting up with breaking news alerts. "Mystery CEO of Horizon Industries revealed," and "Eleanor Blackwood steps into public eye after 2 decades of corporate secrecy." The shareholder reactions ranged from surprise to intense interest as I outlined the specific details of our corporate consolidation, the elimination of artificial divisions between operating units, the streamlined reporting structures, the enhanced integration of our global research and development initiatives. "This consolidation includes the full integration of Mercer Solutions," I explained, timing this revelation to coincide precisely with Sophia's parallel announcement at Richard's meeting. "A subsidiary that has served as our public-facing entity in certain markets, but will now be properly positioned within our unified corporate structure." On the monitoring screen, I could see Richard's face as Sophia delivered the same information to the Mercer Solutions board. His expression transformed from confusion to disbelief as she explained that Horizon Industries was the parent company that had always owned and controlled Mercer Solutions, despite the operational illusion of independence that had been maintained. "Ms. Chen," one of the board members was asking, "if Horizon Industries owns Mercer Solutions, Who owns Horizon Industries? Horizon Industries was founded and is majority-owned by Eleanor Blackwood, Sophia replied, her timing perfect as she gestured toward the large screen at the end of the boardroom, which now displayed my ongoing shareholder address. I watched as Richard turned toward the screen, his face draining of color as he recognized me, his wife of 20 years, introducing myself to the business world as Eleanor Blackwood, founder and CEO of Horizon Industries. The cognitive dissonance was evident in his expression, the struggle to reconcile the supportive wife he thought he knew with the corporate leader now visible to him and everyone else in the room. Beside him, Vanessa's eyes widened with a different kind of recognition, the swift connecting of dots that her analytical mind had already been assembling. Returning my full attention to the shareholder address, I continued outlining our vision for Horizon's future, the strategic investments in emerging technologies, the expansion of our global footprint, the financial projections that showed accelerated growth under our consolidated structure. The Dresden acquisition, I explained, highlighting a recent success, has already yielded technological advances that will position Horizon at the forefront of semiconductor manufacturing for the next decade. Our integration team has discovered and secured proprietary carbon nanotube technology that significantly outperforms current market standards. As I detailed these achievements and our forward-looking strategy, the shareholder response was overwhelmingly positive. The chat function in our broadcast platform filled with congratulatory messages and expressions of confidence in both the consolidated structure and my leadership. 15 minutes into my address, as I prepared to transition to the Q&A portion, I received a text from Sophia. Richard requested private conversation after initial shock. Now in conference room with legal team. Vanessa remained in boardroom, reviewing documents provided by legal. Proceed with standard protocol, I replied, discreetly. Offer both options as discussed. To the shareholders, I said, before we move to questions, I want to address what may seem like an unusual corporate history. My decision to maintain privacy regarding my role as Horizon's founder and CEO was strategic, not personal. 25. Years ago, when I established this company, the technology manufacturing sector presented significant barriers to female founders. Operating with a degree of anonymity allowed Horizon to secure partnerships, contracts, and investments that might otherwise have been impeded by gender bias. This explanation, crafted carefully by our communications team, was truthful without being overly detailed. It acknowledged the reality of my strategic choice without mentioning Richard or the specific mechanism of my anonymity. That strategic necessity has diminished as our company has grown in size and influence, I continued. Today's consolidation and my public emergence as CEO represent not a change in leadership, but simply a change in visibility. As I transitioned to taking questions from shareholders, I monitored the updates from Sophia regarding Richard's reaction. He had moved through the initial shock and was now in what appeared to be intense negotiation mode, attempting to salvage some form of control or at least a dignified exit. For the next 30 minutes, I fielded questions from shareholders about our technology roadmap, market strategy, financial projections, and corporate governance. Throughout, I maintained the same composed, authoritative presence that had characterized my leadership of Horizon for 25 years. Only now it was visible to the world rather than exercised through carefully managed proxies. As the shareholder address concluded, the financial news feeds showed Horizon's stock price already rising in response to the announcement. The market was reacting positively to both the consolidated structure and the revelation of stable, consistent leadership that had been present all along. Thank you for your attention and your continued confidence in Horizon Industries, I concluded. The detailed consolidation plan and forward-looking projections are available in the materials distributed to all shareholders. I look forward to our continued success together. As the broadcast ended and the technical team began disassembling, the studio setup, Adrienne approached with her tablet displaying dozens of media requests already flooding in. The response is overwhelming, she reported. Every major business publication wants an exclusive interview. The personal angle is generating particular interest. The CEO who built a global corporation while maintaining complete privacy for 2 decades. Schedule a press conference for tomorrow morning, I decided. Today, we focus on managing the internal transition. My secure phone rang with a call from Sophia. Richard has accepted the modified severance package, she informed me without preamble. The legal team is finalizing the paperwork now. And Vanessa? I asked, curious about her reaction. More pragmatic than expected, Sophia replied. She's requested consideration for a position within the restructured organization, specifically in our European operations division. Interesting, I noted. Has she indicated any continuing personal involvement with Richard? When presented, with the condition that any role with Horizon would require termination of personal ties, she requested time to consider her options. Give her 24 hours, I decided. Her abilities are valuable, but I won't compromise on that condition. Understood, Sophia confirmed. Richard is asking if you'll speak with him directly before he leaves. I considered this request carefully. A conversation with Richard now, in the immediate aftermath of his discovery, would be emotionally charged and potentially unproductive. Yet there was a certain closure in confronting the reality of our situation, directly rather than continuing to communicate through intermediaries. I'll be there in 30 minutes, I decided. Have security maintain appropriate protocols. As my driver navigated through midday traffic toward the Mercer Solutions building, I reviewed the surveillance summary from the morning's events. Richard's initial shock had given way to anger, then to a kind of desperate negotiation as he attempted to salvage some portion of what he believed was his career. When I arrived at the Mercer Solutions building, Sophia was waiting in the lobby to escort me to the conference room where Richard waited. It felt strange to walk openly through this space as Eleanor Blackwood rather than visiting covertly as I occasionally had in my role as Richard's wife. He's still processing, Sophia warned quietly as we rode the elevator to the executive floor. The legal team described his emotional state as fluctuating between anger, disbelief, and a sort of retrospective analysis, attempting to identify moments when he might have recognized the truth. The conference room door was open, revealing Richard seated alone at the long table, staring at the paperwork before him. He looked up as I entered, his expression shifting through several emotions in rapid succession: recognition, confusion, anger, and finally a wary caution. "Eleanor," he said, my name sounding strange on his lips, as if he was addressing a stranger who coincidentally shared his wife's name. "Richard," I replied evenly, taking a seat across from him as Sophia positioned herself near the door, present but unobtrusive. For a moment, we simply regarded each other. Two people who had shared 20 years of marriage while living in fundamentally different realities. 20 years, he finally said, his voice a mixture of disbelief and accusation. For 20 years. You let me believe that I was building something, that my success was my own. Why? It was the most direct question he could have asked, cutting straight to the heart of our shared fiction. Initially, it was strategic, I replied honestly. When I founded Horizon, the industry was unreceptive to female leadership, particularly in manufacturing technology. Creating a subsidiary with a male public face opened doors that would have remained closed otherwise. And later, he pressed, when Horizon was established, when those barriers were less significant? Later, it was efficient, I explained. The structure worked. You executed the strategies developed at Horizon, believing they were your own initiatives. Your ambition and confidence made you an effective frontman for portions of our operations. He flinched slightly at the term frontman, but didn't dispute its accuracy. Our marriage, he said after a moment. Was that strategic too? A convenient way to maintain control of your frontman? The question carried more emotion than his previous inquiries, touching on the personal rather than just the professional deception. Our marriage served multiple purposes, I acknowledged. It provided a logical explanation for my proximity to Mercer Solutions, without revealing my actual role. It created a social cover that kept attention focused on you rather than me. And yes, it facilitated a certain operational efficiency. So it was never real, he concluded, his voice hardening. Just another corporate arrangement. I considered his statement, weighing the complex reality against his simplistic interpretation. It was real in the sense that we shared a life for 20 years, I replied carefully. But it wasn't based on a full disclosure of who I was or what I had built. You married Eleanor Mercer, the supportive wife who had set aside her modest business ambitions to support yours. That person was a role I played, not my complete identity. And now? He asked, gesturing toward the paperwork. I'm just dismissed? Terminated like any other employee who's outlived his usefulness? You're being offered a severance package that recognizes your 20 years of service, I corrected. It's generous by any standard corporate measure. The alternative was a position within the restructured organization with clearly defined responsibilities and reporting relationships, which you rejected. A demotion, he said bitterly. From what I thought was CEO to some middle management position. A clarification, I countered. An opportunity to continue contributing within the actual corporate structure rather than the fictional one you believed existed. Richard fell silent, staring at the documents before him. I could almost see him, mentally revisiting the past 20 years, reinterpreting events and decisions through the lens of this new understanding. Vanessa, he said suddenly. Did she know? Was she part of this arrangement? No, I assured him. Ms. Carter was as unaware of the actual corporate structure as you were, though she proved more perceptive in recent days. She's currently considering her own options regarding future employment with Horizon. This information seemed to surprise him. You're offering her a position? Her abilities are valuable, I said simply. Her personal choices are her own, provided they don't conflict with Horizon's interests. The implication was clear, and Richard understood it immediately. You're making her choose between a career opportunity and her relationship with me. I'm establishing clear conditions for employment with my company, I corrected. Conditions that eliminate potential conflicts of interest and unnecessary complications. He laughed, a short, bitter sound without humor. You've thought of everything, haven't you? Controlled every variable, anticipated every contingency. Not everything, I acknowledged. I hadn't anticipated you leaving me for your assistant for instance. That necessitated an acceleration of our corporate consolidation timeline. Richard looked up sharply, suddenly understanding. That's why this is happening now. Not because of some strategic corporate evolution, but because I told you I was leaving. Your decision to end our marriage removed a key component of the operational structure we'd maintained for 20 years, I explained. Once that element was no longer viable, a comprehensive reassessment became necessary. So this, he gestured between us, this revelation, this public emergence as CEO, this termination of my position, it's what? Revenge for my leaving you? It's a business decision necessitated by changed circumstances, I replied evenly. The timing is connected to your personal choice, yes, but the substance of the decision is based on Horizon's operational needs. Richard studied me with new eyes, as if truly seeing me for the first time in 20 years. I never knew you at all, did I? You knew exactly what I allowed you to see, I acknowledged. The rest was projection. Your assumptions about who I was and what I wanted, based more on your expectations than on any genuine understanding. He nodded slowly, a dawning recognition in his expression. And now? What happens to Eleanor Mercer, the supportive wife? Does she simply disappear now that Eleanor Blackwood has emerged publicly? In essence, yes, I confirmed. The role has served its purpose and is no longer necessary. Eleanor Blackwood will now operate openly as the founder and CEO of Horizon Industries, and our divorce will proceed as a straightforward legal dissolution of a 20-year marriage, I assured him. The prenuptial agreement you insisted upon will govern the financial aspects, though I imagine your perspective on its purpose has shifted somewhat. A faint, rueful smile touched his lips as he recognized the irony. The prenuptial agreement he had crafted to protect his assets from what he perceived as a wife, with limited financial prospects, would now serve primarily to establish the complete separation of my substantial fortune from his claims. You've won, he said finally. Completely and absolutely. This isn't about winning, Richard, I corrected him. It's about transition, from one operational structure to another, more efficient one. Your role in the previous structure has concluded, but that doesn't diminish the function you served for 20 years. He regarded me skeptically. You're saying I should be proud of my unwitting service as your corporate figurehead? Take satisfaction in executing strategies I believed were my own but were actually designed by others? I'm saying that your contribution to Horizon's success was real, even if your understanding of it was incomplete, I clarified. The Richardson contract you secured last week will generate significant value for our European operations. The client, relationships you cultivated have been genuinely beneficial. Your execution of the strategies developed at the executive level was generally effective. It was as much acknowledgement as I could honestly provide, recognition of his functional utility without pretending his role had been more central or autonomous than it actually was. Richard seemed to absorb this assessment, weighing it against his shattered self-perception. After a moment, he reached for a pen and signed the final pages of the severance agreement. I suppose there's a certain freedom in this, he said, pushing the documents toward me. No more illusions, no more maintained fictions. Yes, I agreed, recognizing the sentiment from my own experience. Authenticity has its own value. As I gathered the signed documents, Richard asked one final question, perhaps the most honest of our entire exchange. Did you ever love me at all? Even in the beginning? The question deserved a truthful answer, one that acknowledged the complex reality of our 20-year relationship. I appreciated qualities in you, I replied carefully. Your confidence, your social ease, your ability to navigate situations that I found personally challenging. There was a genuine respect for how effectively you fulfilled the role I needed within my larger strategy. But not love, he concluded, his expression resigned rather than wounded. Not in the conventional sense, I acknowledged. Our marriage was founded on mutual utility rather than emotional connection. You gained the supportive wife who enhanced your executive image. I gained the corporate frontman who facilitated my strategic privacy. Richard nodded slowly, accepting this final clarification of our shared history. Goodbye, Eleanor Blackwood, he said, rising from his chair with a dignity I found myself respecting. I suspect the business world is about to discover what I never recognized, that you are a force to be reckoned with. Goodbye, Richard, I replied, watching as he gathered his personal items and walked toward the door. I wish you well in your future endeavors. As he passed Sophia, he paused for a brief moment. She's quite extraordinary, isn't she? He asked, not waiting for an answer before continuing out of the conference room for the last time. When the door closed behind him, Sophia approached with her tablet ready. The press conference is scheduled for tomorrow at 10 a.m. The board has issued a unanimous statement of support for the consolidated structure, and initial market response has been overwhelmingly positive. Horizon stock is up 7% already. I nodded, satisfied with these developments but more focused on the conversation that had just concluded. 20 years of carefully maintained fiction had ended with a surprisingly straightforward exchange. No histrionics, no desperate pleas, just the final acknowledgement of a reality that had existed all along beneath the surface of our shared life. What about Ms. Carter's decision? I asked, turning my attention to the other loose end in this corporate drama. She's just informed us, Sophia replied, checking her tablet. She's accepting the position in our European division, effective immediately, with all the stipulated conditions. Including the personal separation from Richard? Yes, Sophia confirmed. Her exact words were, "I appreciate the opportunity to be part of something genuinely groundbreaking, not someone else's illusion." I smiled slightly, appreciating her pragmatism. She'll do well at Horizon. Schedule a meeting with her next week to discuss her role in the Dresden technology integration. As we walked together toward the elevator, I felt a peculiar lightness. Not the vindictive satisfaction of having orchestrated a complex revenge, but the simple relief of integration. After 20 years of compartmentalization, of maintaining separate identities and carefully managed facades, I was finally operating as a single, unified person, Eleanor Blackwood, founder and CEO of Horizon Industries. The elevator doors opened to reveal the lobby, where a security team waited to escort me to my car. Through the glass front doors, I could see a small gathering of journalists already assembled, hoping for a glimpse of the mysterious CEO who had just stepped out of the shadows after 20 years. "Ready?" Sophia asked quietly. I smiled, feeling more genuinely myself than I had in 2 decades. Absolutely. Together, we stepped forward into the light. Behind us, the chapter of my life as Richard Mercer's wife closed definitively. Ahead lay a future where I would no longer hide my achievements or diminish my vision to maintain someone else's illusion of success. 3 months later, I stood on the stage at the London Technology Conference, delivering the keynote address that I had once planned to present via secure video link. The auditorium was filled to capacity, industry leaders and technology innovators all eager to hear from the woman who had built one of the most successful manufacturing technology companies in the world while remaining completely anonymous. Innovation isn't just about technology, I told the rapt audience. It's about perspective, seeing possibilities where others see only limitations. From my position on stage, I could see Vanessa in the front row, seated with our European leadership team. She had proven herself remarkably valuable during the Dresden integration, her analytical skills and strategic thinking making her a natural fit for our expanding European operations. The condition of personal separation from Richard had proven no impediment. She had chosen her professional future without hesitation. Richard himself had relocated to the West Coast, according to the discreet monitoring I still maintained of former executives. He had secured a position with a mid-sized technology firm, respectable but well within the boundaries of his non-compete agreement. The company had issued a press release highlighting his extensive executive experience, though with notably vague specifics about his actual achievements. Our divorce had been finalized 6 weeks after the revelation. The proceedings, remarkably straightforward given the prenuptial agreement he had insisted upon. The business press had speculated wildly about the dramatic timing of our personal and professional separations, but the narrative crafted by our communications team had effectively redirected focus to Horizon's strategic consolidation rather than the personal dynamics that had triggered it. As I concluded my keynote to enthusiastic applause, I felt none of the vindictive satisfaction that might have accompanied a purely revenge-motivated scenario. Instead, I experienced something more profound, the deep contentment of finally living an integrated life, of being recognized for achievements that had always been mine alone. The reporter from Business Week approached as I stepped from the stage, digital recorder in hand. "Ms. Blackwood, your emergence as Horizon's founder and CEO has been called the corporate revelation of the decade. After 20 years in the shadows, how does it feel to finally receive recognition for your achievements?" I considered the question, thinking not of Richard or of revenge, but of the freedom that came with authenticity. "Recognition has never been my primary motivation," I replied honestly. building something of value, creating technologies that advance human capability. Those have always been the driving forces behind Horizon's success. And yet, the reporter persisted, there must be some satisfaction in setting the record straight after so many years of allowing others to take credit for your work. I smiled, appreciating the angle she was pursuing, but choosing a different path. The past is instructive but not defining. Horizon Industries is focused on the future, on the innovations we'll create, the markets we'll develop, the possibilities we'll explore. That future begins with clarity about who we are and what we value. As the interview concluded and I moved toward the waiting car, Sophia fell into step beside me, her tablet displaying the latest updates from our global operations. The Dresden technology integration is exceeding projections, she reported. James estimates we're now 42 months ahead of our closest competitors in semiconductor capabilities. Excellent, I nodded. And the London expansion? Site acquisition. Completed yesterday, development plans already approved by local authorities. I stepped into the car, Sophia beside me, as we prepared to return to our hotel for an evening of further meetings. Through the window, I could see the London skyline, a mix of historic architecture and modern innovation, much like Horizon itself, with its deep foundations and future-focused vision. 20 years of strategic patience had built a global technology leader. 3 months of controlled revelation had transformed its public identity. And one man's decision to leave his wife for his younger assistant had inadvertently liberated that wife to claim her rightful position as one of the most successful CEOs of her generation. Not revenge, I reflected, as the car pulled away from the curb. Just the natural consequence of choices made and realities revealed. Richard had chosen to leave what he believed was a supportive wife for a younger, more ambitious woman. In doing so, he had freed that wife to emerge as the corporate leader she had always been. Sometimes, I mused, the most fitting response to betrayal isn't orchestrating someone's downfall. It's simply allowing them to witness your rise. Eleanor. Blackwood was finally visible to the world, stepping confidently into the light she had created. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.